Across the ancient world, some of the most famous landmarks are also the least understood. The immense stones of Sacsayhuaman are fitted together with such precision that even modern tools struggle to replicate them, while the vast complex of Angkor Wat reveals astronomical alignments hidden within its design. In Egypt, the enigmatic Temple of Karnak stretches across a massive scale, its purpose and construction evolving over centuries in ways still debated today. And in Turkey, Göbekli Tepe pushes back the origins of monumental architecture by thousands of years. These sites are not just symbols of the past. They are reminders that even the most studied civilizations still hold mysteries we have yet to solve. At the western edge of the vast and unforgiving Shahdad Desert, where the immense expanse of the Dashti Lut stretches into one of the hottest environments ever recorded on Earth, lies a cluster of ancient remains that challenge nearly every assumption about early human civilization. Today, the land appears almost alien, scorched, wind-carved, and seemingly devoid of life. Yet beneath this hostile surface, archaeologists have uncovered traces of a once thriving human presence. Organized settlements, engineered structures, and most remarkably, compelling evidence of advanced metallurgical activity that suggests Shahdad was far more than an isolated outpost. It may have been a crucial industrial center in the ancient world. The geographical setting alone raises immediate questions. The Lut Desert is not merely dry, it is extreme beyond conventional limits. Surface temperatures here have been recorded at levels capable of destroying organic material within hours. Water sources are scarce to non-existent. Vegetation is nearly absent, and sandstorms relentlessly reshape the terrain. Under such conditions, long-term human habitation seems improbable. And yet, the Shahdad site reveals structured layouts, rectangular foundations, traces of mud brick architecture, and indications of planned spatial organization. These were not temporary shelters erected by nomads, but permanent installations suggesting a stable, organized community that had mastered survival in one of the most hostile climates on the planet. One of the earliest puzzles lies in the construction itself. The buildings were primarily made of mud brick, a material typically vulnerable to erosion, especially in environments exposed to wind and thermal extremes. However, the remains at Shahdad indicate a surprising level of durability. Whether this resilience was due to specific construction techniques, unique soil composition, or the preservative effects of the hyper-arid climate remains an open question. What is clear is that the builders possessed a deep understanding of their environment, adapting their materials and methods in ways that allowed their structures to endure for millennia. Yet it is not the architecture alone that defines Shahdad's significance. The true enigma emerges from what lies within and around these structures. Excavations have revealed furnaces, slag deposits, and a wide array of copper artifacts, and pointing unmistakably to metallurgical production on a notable scale. This is where Shahdad begins to transform from a curious desert settlement into something far more profound, a potential industrial hub operating at the edge of the known world during the Bronze Age. The presence of metallurgical infrastructure in such an inhospitable region presents a paradox. Metalworking, particularly copper smelting, is a resource-intensive process. It requires not only raw ore, but also sustained high temperatures, which in turn demand large quantities of fuel, typically wood or charcoal. It also often depends on water for cooling, processing, and supporting the workforce. Shahdad, by contrast, offers none of these resources in abundance. There are no forests to provide fuel, no rivers to sustain large-scale industrial activity, and no obvious local sources of copper ore that would justify such production. And yet, the evidence is undeniable. Shahdad was a center of metalworking, and not a minor one. This contradiction has led researchers to propose several intriguing hypotheses. One possibility is that Shahdad functioned as a processing and distribution hub within a much larger trade network. Raw materials may have been transported from distant regions, perhaps from the Iranian highlands or even further afield, while fuel could have been imported or derived from now-vanished ecological zones. In this scenario, Shahdad's location, though harsh, might have been strategically advantageous, positioned along key trade routes linking ancient civilizations such as Elam and the Indus Valley. Rather than being isolated, Shahdad may have been deeply interconnected, yet serving as a node in a network that facilitated the movement of goods, technologies, and ideas across vast distances. Another possibility is that the environmental conditions of Shahdad were not always as extreme as they are today. Paleoclimatic studies suggest that regions now classified as hyper-arid may have experienced more temperate conditions in the past, with greater access to water and vegetation. If Shahdad once existed in a slightly more hospitable environment, the presence of metallurgical activity becomes more plausible. Over time, as the climate shifted and resources diminished, the settlement may have been abandoned, leaving behind only the hardened traces of its industrial past. What makes Shahdad particularly compelling is not just the presence of metallurgy, but its apparent sophistication. The scale of slag deposits indicates repeated and sustained production rather than isolated experimentation. The artifacts themselves, tools, ornaments, and fragments of worked metal, suggest a level of skill and specialization. This was not a community merely surviving at the edge of habitability. It was producing, crafting, and possibly exporting valuable goods. In this light, Shahdad begins to resemble an early industrial center, one that operated under conditions that would challenge even modern engineering. Surrounding the archaeological site, the landscape adds another layer of mystery. The so-called kalutes, massive wind-carved ridges and formations, stretch across the desert like the ruins of a forgotten city. From above, they form corridors and walls that resemble urban planning on a monumental scale. Although these formations are natural, created by millennia of erosion, their uncanny resemblance to human-made structures has fueled speculation and, at times, confusion. For ancient inhabitants, these formations may have served as natural barriers, windbreaks, or even navigational landmarks, integrating the natural environment into the functional design of the settlement. Equally puzzling is the question of water. No large permanent water sources are visible in the region today, yet a settlement of this scale, especially one engaged in metallurgy, would have required reliable access to water. Some researchers suggest the existence of ancient groundwater systems, possibly accessed through early forms of canal-like channels or wells. Others propose that seasonal water flows, now vanished, once sustained the community, and the absence of clear evidence leaves this question unresolved, adding to the broader enigma of how Shahdad functioned at all. Then there is the matter of its disappearance. Unlike sites destroyed by warfare or sudden catastrophe, Shahdad does not present clear signs of violent destruction. Instead, it appears to have been gradually abandoned, its structures left to the desert. Was this due to environmental collapse, the exhaustion of resources, or a shift in trade routes that rendered the settlement obsolete? Or was it a combination of factors, slowly eroding the viability of life until the inhabitants were forced to leave? In the end, the Shahdad Desert structures stand as a paradox, frozen in time. They reveal a society capable of organization, adaptation, and technological achievement in a place where survival itself seems improbable. Most striking of all is the evidence of metallurgy, an industry that demands coordination, resources, and knowledge, thriving in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Whether Shahdad was a peripheral outpost that defied the odds or a central hub in a vast and largely forgotten network remains an open question. What is certain is that Shahdad challenges the narrative of early civilizations as limited by their environments. Instead, it suggests that human ingenuity may have pushed far beyond what we currently understand, establishing centers of production and innovation in places we would never expect. And somewhere beneath the wind-swept sands of the Lut Desert, the full story of Shahdad, its rise, its industry, and its quiet disappearance, may still be waiting to be uncovered. In your opinion, what truly caused an ancient metallurgical center like Shahdad Desert to be abandoned? Climate change, resource depletion, or a greater mystery yet to be uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Across the vast, sun-scorched landscapes of southern Jordan, where shifting sands and rocky plateaus dominate the horizon, there exists a structure so understated that it can easily escape notice, yet so immense that it defies simple explanation. Known as the Khatt Shebib, this long, low stone wall stretches across the desert like a faint scar etched into the earth. First documented in the early 20th century by aerial reconnaissance, the structure has since become one of the most perplexing archaeological features in the Middle East, an enigma defined not by grandeur but by contradiction. Unlike monumental constructions such as the Great Wall of China, which immediately communicate their defensive purpose through sheer scale and architectural sophistication, the Khatt Shebib offers no such clarity. At first glance, it appears almost insignificant, a line of roughly stacked stones, rarely exceeding 1.5 meters in height and often much lower in its current, eroded state. Its width is modest, its construction rudimentary, and its form inconsistent. Yet this simplicity belies a staggering fact. The wall extends for approximately 150 kilometers, with additional branches and segments that complicate its overall layout. This juxtaposition between modest construction and enormous scale forms the foundation of its mystery. The geography through which the Khatt Shebib runs only deepens the puzzle. The wall does not strictly adhere to natural defensive advantages. It does not consistently follow ridgelines, river valleys, or other strategic features that ancient builders typically exploited. Instead, it cuts across terrain with a curious persistence, sometimes aligning loosely with the contours of the land, at other times ignoring them entirely. This irregular yet continuous trajectory suggests intention, but not one that aligns with conventional military or territorial logic. It feels deliberate, yet opaque, planned, but according to a system we have yet to decode. Archaeological investigation into the Khatt Shebib has revealed little in the way of definitive answers. The construction technique is straightforward. Locally sourced stones stacked without mortar, forming a low barrier that would have required significant labor over a prolonged period. However, the simplicity of the method does not diminish the logistical challenge of building such a structure across harsh desert conditions. Organizing manpower, sourcing materials, and maintaining continuity over such distances would have required coordination and purpose, and yet no clear evidence of centralized authority, inscriptions, or associated settlements has been found to explain who undertook this effort or why. Dating the wall has proven equally elusive. Some scholars propose that it may have originated during the Nabatean period between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, a time when trade networks flourished across the region and desert adaptation was highly developed. Others suggest a later construction, possibly during the Byzantine era, when frontier management and land use systems became more structured. However, the absence of datable artifacts directly linked to the wall leaves these hypotheses unconfirmed. The Khatt Shebib exists in a temporal ambiguity, suspended between possibilities, resistant to precise classification. One of the more compelling interpretations frames the wall not as a defensive structure, but as a boundary, specifically a division between ecological or economic zones. In this view, the Khatt Shebib may have marked the transition between arable land and grazing territory, separating sedentary agricultural communities from nomadic pastoral groups. Such a boundary would have practical significance, regulating movement, resource use, and seasonal migration. The low height of the wall would then make sense, serving as a visual and symbolic marker rather than a physical barrier. Yet even this theory raises questions. If the purpose was merely to delineate space, why invest in a continuous stone structure of such length? Why not use more flexible or less labor-intensive markers? Adding another layer of intrigue is the broader archaeological landscape in which the Khatt Shebib is situated. The surrounding deserts of Jordan are home to numerous enigmatic features, including large-scale stone formations known as desert kites, believed to have been used for hunting, as well as geometric arrangements visible only from above. These structures suggest a long tradition of landscape-scale planning and environmental manipulation. It is possible that the Khatt Shebib was part of a larger system, an integrated network of movement control, resource management, and spatial organization. If so, its meaning may only be understood in relation to these other elements, if forming a kind of ancient infrastructure whose logic has yet to be fully reconstructed. And yet, despite all these theories, the central question remains unresolved, and it is here that the true mystery of the Khatt Shebib emerges most sharply. What was its actual purpose? This is not merely a question of classification, but of intent. The wall is too long to be incidental, too coordinated to be random, and too deliberately constructed to be dismissed as a minor or local feature. At the same time, it lacks the defining characteristics of known categories. It is not a fortress, not a road, not clearly a boundary, and not obviously ceremonial. It exists in a conceptual void, resisting the frameworks through which archaeologists typically interpret the past. This ambiguity is precisely what makes the Khatt Shebib so compelling. And in many archaeological contexts, mystery arises from missing pieces, fragments of a larger puzzle that can, in time, be reconstructed. But here, the puzzle itself is unclear. We do not know what picture we are trying to assemble. The wall challenges our assumptions about ancient engineering, about the relationship between scale and function, and about the ways in which past societies organized their landscapes. It suggests that there were forms of knowledge, systems of planning, and cultural priorities that do not map neatly onto our current understanding. Perhaps the Khatt Shebib was multifunctional, serving different roles at different times. Perhaps it began as a boundary and evolved into something else. Or perhaps its purpose was symbolic, embedded in social or cultural meanings that leave no material trace. And it is also possible that its significance was obvious to those who built it, so self-evident that it required no explanation, an idea that is both humbling and unsettling, as it reminds us of the limits of modern interpretation. In the end, the Khatt Shebib stands as a quiet but powerful reminder that not all ancient achievements are monumental in appearance, and not all mysteries are hidden beneath layers of complexity. Sometimes, the most profound enigmas lie in what seems simple, a line of stones stretching across a desert, asking a question that has yet to be answered. What do you think the true purpose of the Khatt Shebib was? A boundary, an ancient management system, or something entirely different? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the arid plains of southeastern Iran, in the fertile yet unpredictable basin of the Halil River, the Konar Sandal complex stands as one of the most unsettling archaeological discoveries of the modern era. For centuries, this landscape appeared unremarkable, just another stretch of desert shaped by wind and time. But in the early 21st century, after illegal excavations exposed fragments of an unknown past, archaeologists began to uncover something extraordinary: the remains of a vast, organized and technologically sophisticated civilization dating back to the 3rd millennium BCE. Located near the region of Jori, this site quickly challenged long-standing assumptions about the origins of urban development and cultural complexity in the ancient world. And it suggested that beyond the well-documented centers of Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley civilization, another powerful society had flourished, one that history had almost entirely forgotten. At the heart of the Konar Sandal complex lie two immense mounds, known as Konar Sandal North and Konar Sandal South. These are not natural formations, but monumental architectural constructions rising above the surrounding terrain like silent witnesses to a lost authority. The southern mound in particular has drawn intense attention due to its resemblance to a stepped platform or proto-ziggurat, echoing structures seen in ancient Sumer. Yet its existence here raises a fundamental question. Was this similarity the result of cultural diffusion, or does it point to parallel development between equally advanced civilizations? The northern mound, meanwhile, appears to have served administrative or ceremonial functions, suggesting a centralized system of governance and ritual. Together, these structures indicate not just habitation, but hierarchy, planning, and a deep understanding of spatial organization. However, the true enigma of Konar Sandal is not merely its scale or layout, it is the astonishing engineering behind its construction, particularly the extensive use of mud brick. At first glance, mud brick may seem like a primitive and fragile material, easily eroded by time and climate. Yet at Konar Sandal, massive walls built from this seemingly humble substance have endured for over 4,000 years in a harsh desert environment. This paradox lies at the core of one of the site's greatest mysteries. The builders of Konar Sandal did not simply stack sun-dried bricks. They engineered them with precision, layering them in complex patterns that suggest an advanced understanding of structural stability, load distribution, and environmental resistance. Detailed examination of the remaining walls reveals that these mud bricks were not uniform in composition. Variations in density, texture, and binding material imply that different mixtures were deliberately used for different structural purposes. Some layers appear compact and tightly bonded, likely designed to bear weight, while others are more porous, possibly intended to regulate temperature or absorb stress. This indicates a level of material science that goes far beyond what is typically attributed to early Bronze Age societies. The question arises, how did they acquire such knowledge? Was it developed through centuries of experimentation, or inherited from an even earlier, unknown tradition? Equally remarkable is the scale at which this technology was applied. The walls at Konar Sandal are not small or provisional. They are monumental, forming platforms, terraces, and enclosures that required coordinated labor and precise planning. Constructing such features with mud brick would have demanded not only technical expertise but also logistical organization, control over resources like water, clay, and labor forces. In a region where environmental conditions can be extreme, maintaining the integrity of such structures over long periods would have required ongoing maintenance and possibly even standardized construction protocols. This suggests the existence of a highly organized society with specialized knowledge and roles. Another layer of complexity lies in the environmental adaptation embedded within these construction techniques. The desert climate of the region is characterized by intense heat during the day and significant temperature drops at night. Mud brick, when properly engineered, can act as an efficient thermal regulator, absorbing heat slowly and releasing it gradually. The massive scale of the walls at Konar Sandal may have been designed not only for defense or monumentality, but also for climate control, creating stable interior environments. This dual functionality, structural and environmental, points to a sophisticated understanding of how architecture interacts with nature. Despite these insights, many aspects of the construction methods remain unexplained. No definitive evidence has yet been found of kilns or firing techniques that would account for the durability of the bricks. This raises the possibility that the builders used organic additives, such as plant fibers, ash, or minerals, to enhance strength and longevity. If so, the exact structure or proportions have been lost to time. Modern attempts to replicate ancient mud brick often fall short of the resilience observed at Konar Sandal, deepening the mystery. It is as if the knowledge required to create these enduring materials vanished along with the civilization that mastered it. Beyond architecture, the site has yielded a wealth of artifacts, including intricately carved chlorite vessels adorned with mythological scenes. And these objects suggest a rich symbolic culture and connections to wider trade networks. Some motifs appear unique, while others hint at interactions with neighboring regions. Yet even here, the identity of the people who created them remains elusive. Among the most provocative discoveries are inscribed tablets bearing symbols that may represent an early writing system. While some signs resemble the Proto-Elamite script, others are entirely unfamiliar, resisting all attempts at decipherment. If these inscriptions do constitute a form of writing, they could redefine our understanding of where and how literacy first emerged. The broader implications of Konar Sandal are profound. It challenges the linear narrative of civilization, spreading outward from a few core regions, suggesting instead a more complex and interconnected ancient world. It raises the possibility that multiple centers of innovation existed simultaneously, each developing unique solutions to common challenges. Yet perhaps the most haunting aspect of the site is its silence. Unlike Mesopotamia, with its extensive textual records, Konar Sandal offers no clear historical voice. There are no known chronicles, no deciphered inscriptions that tell us who these people were, what they believed, or how they saw their world. And so, the Konar Sandal complex remains suspended between discovery and enigma. Its towering mud brick structures defy expectations, its artifacts hint at lost knowledge, and its very existence forces us to reconsider the boundaries of early human achievement. Was this truly an independent cradle of civilization, and a part of a forgotten network that once connected distant cultures? Did its people vanish suddenly, or did they gradually fade into obscurity, leaving behind only the architecture of their ingenuity? In the end, Konar Sandal does not simply provide answers, it reshapes the questions themselves, inviting us to look deeper into the shadows of the ancient past, where entire civilizations may still lie hidden beneath the dust. Do you think the mud brick construction techniques at Konar Sandal were the result of natural development or evidence of lost knowledge? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden within the rugged volcanic highlands of Gran Canaria, the sacred cave complex of Risco Caído and the sacred mountains of Gran Canaria stands as one of the most extraordinary and enigmatic archaeological discoveries in Europe. At first glance, it appears to be a network of simple, rock-cut chambers carved into the mountainside by an isolated prehistoric society. Yet the deeper researchers explore, the more it becomes clear that this is not merely a habitation site or a ceremonial space. It is something far more complex, a place where architecture, cosmology, and ritual appear to converge in a way that challenges conventional assumptions about ancient island cultures. The caves themselves are entirely artificial, painstakingly excavated into volcanic tuff, using tools that by all known accounts should have been insufficient for such precision. The people responsible, often linked to the indigenous inhabitants of the Canary Islands, lived in relative isolation for centuries, cut off from major continental civilizations. They possessed no advanced metallurgy, no written language, and no obvious means of transmitting complex scientific knowledge across generations. And yet within this isolation, they created spaces with remarkable geometric consistency. Rounded chambers, smooth walls, and carefully shaped domes that seem to follow intentional design rather than improvisation. Among these, one chamber in particular, known today as Cave 6, has become the focal point of global fascination. Inside this chamber, a phenomenon unfolds that has transformed Risco Caído from an archaeological curiosity into a profound scientific mystery. A small aperture carved into the ceiling allows a narrow beam of sunlight to penetrate the darkness of the cave. At certain times of the day, and more importantly, at specific times of the year, this beam enters at a precise angle and projects onto the interior walls. As the sun moves across the sky, the light travels slowly along the curved surface of the chamber, illuminating a series of engraved symbols, triangles, grooves, and shapes that appear deliberately positioned along its path. The effect is not random. It is systematic, repeatable, and astonishingly accurate. What makes this phenomenon truly remarkable is its alignment with key solar events. During the summer and winter solstices, the light enters the chamber in a distinct and predictable way, striking particular areas of the wall with uncanny precision. The movement of the beam changes subtly over the course of the year, creating a dynamic pattern that appears to encode the passage of time itself. In essence, the cave functions as a kind of solar calendar, a natural observatory that tracks celestial cycles through architecture and light. This is not a crude approximation. It is a system that requires an understanding of solar trajectories, seasonal variation, and spatial alignment that is far more sophisticated than previously attributed to the island's ancient inhabitants. The comparison to monumental sites such as Stonehenge is inevitable, yet Risco Caído presents a fundamentally different approach. Whereas Stonehenge uses massive standing stones arranged in open space to frame the sky, Risco Caído internalizes the cosmos, bringing sunlight into a controlled, enclosed environment. Here, the sky is not observed directly. It is translated into a moving projection, a beam of light that interacts with human-made symbols in a dark, silent chamber. This inversion, from observing the heavens externally to recreating them internally, suggests a conceptual leap that is as philosophical as it is technical. Equally intriguing are the carvings themselves. The illuminated engravings are not random decorations, but appear to be integral to the light phenomenon. Many researchers have noted that the shapes resemble stylized representations of the human body, particularly female forms associated with fertility and reproduction. Nor others argue that they may correspond to constellations or symbolic mappings of celestial events. The interplay between light and carving raises the possibility that the chamber was used not only to track time, but to ritualize it, to transform the abstract passage of seasons into a visual and experiential event. In this sense, the cave may have functioned simultaneously as an observatory, a calendar, and a sacred space where cosmological knowledge was embedded within ritual practice. The broader landscape surrounding Risco Caído reinforces this interpretation. The cave is not an isolated anomaly, but part of a vast cultural network that includes hundreds of rock-cut dwellings, storage chambers, and ceremonial sites scattered across the mountainous terrain. Together, they form a sacred landscape in which natural features and human constructions are intertwined. Elevated vantage points suggest intentional observation of the horizon, while the positioning of certain caves hints at alignment with solar or lunar events. This integrated system implies that the people who built Risco Caído possessed not only technical skill, but also a coherent worldview in which the movements of the heavens were deeply connected to life on Earth. Perhaps the most puzzling aspect of all is the question of origin. The indigenous inhabitants of the Canary Islands are widely believed to have Berber roots from North Africa, yet the level of sophistication demonstrated at Risco Caído does not neatly align with what is known of those early cultures. How did a community living in apparent isolation develop such an advanced understanding of solar cycles? Was this knowledge inherited from earlier migrations, or did it emerge independently through long-term observation and experimentation? The absence of written records leaves these questions unanswered, forcing researchers to rely on indirect evidence and interpretation. The precision of the light phenomenon, in particular, continues to defy simple explanation. To create such an effect, the builders would have needed to understand not only the path of the sun across the sky, but also how to manipulate architectural space to capture and direct that light. The angle of the aperture, the curvature of the chamber, and the placement of the carvings all had to be calibrated with extraordinary care, when even a slight deviation would disrupt the alignment. Yet the system works with a consistency that suggests deliberate design rather than accidental discovery. It is difficult to reconcile this level of accuracy with the technological limitations typically attributed to prehistoric island societies. And so, Risco Caído remains suspended between categories. It is at once a dwelling, a sanctuary, a calendar, and a machine, an instrument built not of gears or metal, but of stone, sunlight, and shadow. Its true purpose may lie not in any single function, but in the synthesis of many, reflecting a world view in which science and spirituality were not separate domains, but different expressions of the same underlying reality. The cave does not merely measure time, it embodies it, transforming the invisible movements of the sun into a tangible, almost theatrical experience. In the end, the greatest mystery of Risco Caído is not just how it was built, but how it was understood by those who used it. What did it mean to stand in that chamber, to watch a beam of sunlight slowly trace its path across the wall, illuminating symbols whose meanings are now lost to time? Was it a tool for survival, marking the seasons for agriculture, a sacred ritual, reenacting the cycle of life and renewal? or something even more profound, a way of connecting human existence to the vast, ordered movements of the cosmos? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. Risco Caído forces us to reconsider what we think we know about ancient knowledge. It reveals that even in isolation, human societies were capable of observing and understanding and encoding the rhythms of the universe in ways that continue to astonish us today. And perhaps most unsettling of all, it reminds us that there are still places on this planet where the past has not fully given up its secrets, where light itself becomes a message from a forgotten world, waiting to be understood. Where are you watching this video from? And what time of day is it for you? Share your location and time in the comments below. Across the remote expanse of the Western Pacific, on the island of Tinian, in the northern Mariana Islands, rows of ancient stone pillars rise quietly from the earth, weathered by centuries yet still standing with a silent precision that continues to challenge modern understanding. These are the Latte stones, monumental megalithic structures built by the ancient Chamorro people, arranged in strikingly straight alignments that stretch across the landscape with a sense of order that feels anything but accidental. At first glance, they may appear to be simple remnants of elevated dwellings, but the deeper one looks, the more these structures begin to reveal a level of planning, engineering, and construction capability that raises profound questions about the technological sophistication of a culture often underestimated in the broader narrative of ancient civilizations. Geographically, Tinian lies within a region defined by isolation, surrounded by vast ocean distances that would have limited contact with other major centers of early human development. And yet within this isolation, the Chamorro people developed a unique architectural tradition centered around the Latte stone, each consisting of a vertical limestone pillar known as a haligi, topped with a hemispherical or capstone element called a tassa. On Tinian, these stones are not randomly scattered. They are arranged in parallel rows, often forming rectangular layouts that suggest deliberate spatial planning. The uniform spacing between each pillar, the consistent orientation of the rows, and the repeated structural logic all point toward a system that was carefully designed rather than improvised. This alone would be impressive, but it is only the beginning of the mystery. What elevates the enigma of the Tinian Latte stone alignments to a far greater level is the extraordinary construction process required to create them. The Chamorro builders did not possess metal tools, wheeled transport, or advanced lifting machinery as understood in modern engineering. Their tools were likely made from stone, shell, or other organic materials, yet they managed to quarry large blocks of limestone, shape them into cylindrical pillars with remarkable uniformity, and carve the distinctive tassa capstones that fit atop them. The precision required to balance a heavy stone cap securely on a narrow vertical column without mortar or binding agents is significant even by contemporary standards. It demands not only an understanding of weight distribution and center of gravity, but also a high level of craftsmanship in shaping the contact surfaces so that the upper stone remains stable over long periods of time. The most compelling question, however, lies in the act of lifting and positioning these massive stones. Some Latte pillars weigh several tons, and the tassa stones, though often slightly smaller, are still substantial in mass. Without cranes, pulleys, or metal reinforcement, how were these stones raised and placed with such accuracy? One hypothesis suggests the use of earthen ramps was gradually built up to allow the stones to be rolled or dragged into position before being carefully lowered into place. Another proposes a system of wooden scaffolding combined with rope, leveraging human coordination and mechanical advantage through simple machines such as levers. There is also the possibility that the Chamorro possessed construction techniques that have not survived in the archaeological record. Methods refined over generations and transmitted orally, then lost as cultural disruptions occurred following European contact in the 16th century. Even more intriguing is the consistency observed across multiple latte stone sites. The dimensions, proportions, and spacing of the structures often follow patterns that imply standardized construction principles. This suggests that the builders were not experimenting randomly, but were instead applying a shared body of knowledge, perhaps even a form of architectural tradition or proto-engineering system. The repetition of these patterns across different locations on Tinian strengthens the idea that this was not the work of isolated communities acting independently, but rather a coordinated cultural practice with established rules and techniques. Beyond construction, the purpose of these alignments remains a subject of debate. The widely accepted interpretation is that latte stones served as the foundation for raised wooden houses, elevating living spaces above the ground to protect against flooding, pests, and humidity. This explanation aligns with environmental logic and is supported by ethnographic parallels in other Pacific Island cultures. However, certain aspects of the Tinian alignments challenge this purely functional view. Some structures are unusually large, with pillars spaced farther apart than would be practical for typical residential buildings. Others are located in areas that do not show clear evidence of long-term habitation. These anomalies open the possibility that at least some latte stone arrangements served ceremonial, social, or symbolic purposes, perhaps marking important communal spaces or reflecting hierarchical distinctions within Chamorro society. The mystery deepens when considering the sudden decline in latte stone construction. By the time European explorers arrived in the Mariana Islands, the tradition was already fading, and within a relatively short period, it ceased altogether. The reasons for this disappearance remain unclear. It may have been influenced by population decline due to disease, cultural disruption caused by colonization, or shifts in social organization that rendered the practice obsolete. Whatever the cause, the knowledge required to construct latte stones at such a scale and precision was not preserved in written form, leaving modern researchers to reconstruct the process through indirect evidence and experimental archaeology. In comparing the Tinian latte stone alignments to other megalithic traditions around the world, parallels can be drawn in terms of ambition and ingenuity, yet the Chamorro structures remain distinct in both form and context. Unlike the massive stone circles of Europe or the precisely cut blocks of Andean civilizations, latte stones represent a hybrid of architectural support and symbolic expression uniquely adapted to the environmental and cultural conditions of the Pacific. Their elegance lies not in sheer size alone, but in the balance between function, form, and the unseen knowledge that made their construction possible. Ultimately, the Tinian latte stone alignments stand as a testament to a lost chapter of human engineering, one that challenges assumptions about technological development in so-called remote societies. They invite us to reconsider what constitutes advanced knowledge and to recognize that sophistication can emerge in many forms, even in places far removed from the traditional centers of ancient innovation. The stones remain, a silent yet precise, offering no direct answers, but continuing to pose a question that has yet to be fully resolved. How did a society without metal, machines, or written records achieve such a level of architectural mastery? And what else might they have known that we have yet to rediscover? So what do you think? Were the Tinian Latte stone alignments simply practical structures built with ingenious but understandable methods? Or do they hint at a deeper, more advanced understanding of engineering that has been lost to time? Long before the rise of dynasties such as the Shang dynasty or the semi-legendary Xia dynasty, a Neolithic culture flourished across the vast landscapes of northeastern China, leaving behind a legacy that continues to challenge modern understanding. Known today as the Hongshan culture, this society, dating roughly from 4700 to 2900 BCE, developed a ritual system centered not around monumental stone architecture or written records, but around one of the most enigmatic materials in human history: jade. What makes the Hongshan jade system particularly compelling is not merely the presence of finely crafted objects, but the evidence of a structured symbolic world, one in which jade functioned as a bridge between the human and the divine, the living and the dead, the earthly and the cosmic. The geographical setting of the Hongshan culture spans parts of modern-day Inner Mongolia and Liaoning province, a region characterized by rolling hills, river valleys, and a climate that would have supported early agricultural communities. Yet unlike later civilizations, where urban centers and administrative systems are clearly defined, Hongshan settlements appear relatively modest. This contrast becomes striking when viewed alongside the scale and sophistication of their ritual sites, particularly at New Heliang. Here, archaeologists uncovered a complex arrangement of stone platforms, altars, cairns, and what is often described as a goddess temple, complete with life-sized sculptures featuring jade-inlaid eyes. The absence of domestic artifacts in these areas suggests that they were not places of daily life, but rather dedicated ceremonial centers, spaces designed for rituals whose meanings are still only partially understood. At the heart of this ritual system lies jade, not as ornamentation, but as a sacred medium imbued with cosmological significance. Unlike gold or bronze, jade does not gleam with immediate visual brilliance. Its value is subtle, almost internal, requiring careful shaping and polishing to reveal its depth. For the Hongshan people, this material seems to have embodied permanence, purity, and perhaps even a form of spiritual resonance. Objects such as the so-called pig dragon pendants, coiled hybrid creatures with ambiguous features, stand out as some of the earliest known representations of what may later evolve into the Chinese dragon motif. Alongside these are circular jade discs, which often interpreted as symbols of the heavens, and other abstract forms whose meanings remain elusive. These objects are frequently found in burial contexts, suggesting that they played a role in funerary rites, possibly serving as conduits for the soul or markers of status within a ritual hierarchy. Yet it is not only the symbolic dimension of Hongshan jade that provokes fascination, it is the sheer technical mastery involved in its creation. Jade, particularly nephrite, is an extraordinarily tough material. Unlike brittle stones that can be chipped or fractured, jade resists direct carving. It cannot be easily cut with simple tools, nor shaped through force alone. Instead, it requires a process of abrasion, slow, deliberate grinding using harder particles such as quartz sand, combined with water and sustained motion. This is where the true mystery begins. The artisans of the Hongshan culture, operating in a period traditionally categorized as the Neolithic, achieved levels of precision that seem almost incompatible with their technological context. Microscopic analysis of Hongshan jade artifacts reveals drill holes of remarkable uniformity, with smooth internal surfaces and consistent diameters. These perforations, often located in delicate or curved sections of the objects, would have required not only stable rotational motion but also precise control over pressure and alignment. The question arises, what kind of tools could produce such results? There is no evidence of metal implements from this period in the region, ruling out the use of bronze or iron drills. Instead, researchers proposed the use of tubular drills made from bamboo or bone, being combined with abrasive slurry. However, even with such tools, achieving the observed level of consistency would demand an extraordinary degree of skill, patience, and perhaps a systematic approach that borders on industrial repetition. Equally astonishing is the surface finish of many Hongshan jade pieces, polished to a soft, almost luminous sheen. These objects display a tactile quality that suggests not only technical competence, but aesthetic intention. The curves of the pig dragon forms, for instance, are fluid and balanced, with no visible tool marks disrupting their continuity. This implies a multi-stage production process involving rough shaping, fine grinding, and extended polishing, each step requiring time, resources, and specialized knowledge. In a society without written records, as the transmission of such techniques would have depended on oral tradition and apprenticeship, raising further questions about the organization of labor and the existence of dedicated artisan classes. The time investment alone is staggering. Experimental archaeology has attempted to replicate similar jade objects using reconstructed Neolithic tools, and the results indicate that even a small piece could require dozens, if not hundreds, of hours to complete. When multiplied across the number of artifacts discovered, this suggests a significant allocation of human effort toward the production of items that were not utilitarian but ritualistic. Why would a community invest so heavily in objects that served no apparent practical function? One possible answer lies in the social and spiritual value attributed to jade. And if these objects were believed to facilitate communication with ancestors or deities, their creation would not be seen as labor, but as a sacred act, an offering in itself. The precision of Hongshan jade craftsmanship also suggests a deeper understanding of material properties and mechanical processes. The consistent curvature of drilled holes indicates the use of rotational techniques, possibly involving bow drills or similar mechanisms capable of generating steady motion over extended periods. The level of control required to prevent the jade from cracking during drilling or shaping reflects not only experience, but also a form of empirical knowledge, an accumulated understanding of how the material behaves under different conditions. This was not merely craftsmanship. It was a form of proto-engineering embedded within a ritual context. When compared to other Neolithic cultures around the world, the Hongshan jade system stands apart. While many societies produce symbolic objects, few demonstrate such a combination of technical sophistication and ritual centrality at such an early stage. In Mesopotamia and Egypt, for example, advanced craftsmanship is typically associated with later periods, supported by hierarchical states and access to metal tools. In contrast, Hongshan appears to have achieved comparable levels of refinement without these advantages, suggesting an alternative pathway to complexity, one driven not by economic expansion or military power, but by spiritual and symbolic imperatives. This raises profound questions about the nature of early social organization. The existence of large ceremonial centers like New Heliang, combined with the production of intricate jade artifacts, implies a degree of coordination and authority that challenges the notion of Hongshan as a simple, village-based society. It is possible that a class of ritual specialists, priests or shamans, oversaw the creation and use of jade objects, directing labor and maintaining the knowledge required for their production. If so, the jade system may have functioned as both a religious and political tool, reinforcing social cohesion and legitimizing leadership through access to the sacred. And yet, despite decades of excavation and analysis, many aspects of the Hongshan jade ritual system remain unresolved. The exact meanings of the symbols, the identity of the deities or forces they represent, and the full extent of the technological processes involved continue to elude definitive explanation. Each artifact, with its smooth surfaces and enigmatic forms, seems to carry a message from a world that has long since vanished. A message encoded not in words, but in material, shape, and technique. In the end, the Hongshan jade ritual system stands as a testament to the ingenuity and imagination of early human societies. It challenges modern assumptions about technological progress, suggesting that sophistication can emerge in unexpected contexts, driven by needs that are not purely practical, but deeply spiritual. The artisans who shaped these objects did more than manipulate stone. They transformed a resistant material into a medium of meaning, crafting not only artifacts, but a worldview. And in doing so, they left behind one of the most intriguing and enduring mysteries of the ancient world. So the question remains, were these jade objects simply ritual tools, or were they part of a larger, now lost system of knowledge, one that we are only beginning to glimpse through the silent language of stone? In your opinion, was the extraordinary jade craftsmanship of the Hongshan culture the result of long-term experimentation, or evidence of knowledge far beyond its time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Across the vast, sun-scorched landscapes of southern Jordan, where shifting sands and rocky plateaus dominate the horizon, there exists a structure so understated that it can easily escape notice, yet so immense that it defies simple explanation. Known as the Khatt Shebib, this long, low stone wall stretches across the desert like a faint scar etched into the earth. First documented in the early 20th century by aerial reconnaissance, the structure has since become one of the most perplexing archaeological features in the Middle East, an enigma defined not by grandeur but by contradiction. Unlike monumental constructions such as the Great Wall of China, which immediately communicate their defensive purpose through sheer scale and architectural sophistication, the Khatt Shebib offers no such clarity. At first glance, it appears almost insignificant, a line of roughly stacked stones, rarely exceeding 1.5 meters in height and often much lower in its current, eroded state. Its width is modest, its construction rudimentary, and its form inconsistent. Yet this simplicity belies a staggering fact. The wall extends for approximately 150 kilometers, with additional branches and segments that complicate its overall layout. This juxtaposition between modest construction and enormous scale forms the foundation of its mystery. The geography through which the Khatt Shebib runs only deepens the puzzle. The wall does not strictly adhere to natural defensive advantages. It does not consistently follow ridgelines, river valleys, or other strategic features that ancient builders typically exploited. Instead, it cuts across terrain with a curious persistence, sometimes aligning loosely with the contours of the land, at other times ignoring them entirely. This irregular yet continuous trajectory suggests intention, but not one that aligns with conventional military or territorial logic. It feels deliberate, yet opaque, planned, but according to a system we have yet to decode. Archaeological investigation into the Khatt Shebib has revealed little in the way of definitive answers. The construction technique is straightforward. Locally sourced stones stacked without mortar, forming a low barrier that would have required significant labor over a prolonged period. However, the simplicity of the method does not diminish the logistical challenge of building such a structure across harsh desert conditions. Organizing manpower, sourcing materials, and maintaining continuity over such distances would have required coordination and purpose, and yet no clear evidence of centralized authority, inscriptions, or associated settlements has been found to explain who undertook this effort or why. Dating the wall has proven equally elusive. Some scholars propose that it may have originated during the Nabatean period between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, a time when trade networks flourished across the region and desert adaptation was highly developed. Others suggest a later construction, possibly during the Byzantine era, when frontier management and land use systems became more structured. However, the absence of datable artifacts directly linked to the wall leaves these hypotheses unconfirmed. The Khatt Shebib exists in a temporal ambiguity, suspended between possibilities, resistant to precise classification. One of the more compelling interpretations frames the wall not as a defensive structure, but as a boundary, specifically a division between ecological or economic zones. In this view, the Khatt Shebib may have marked the transition between arable land and grazing territory, separating sedentary agricultural communities from nomadic pastoral groups. Such a boundary would have practical significance, regulating movement, resource use, and seasonal migration. The low height of the wall would then make sense, serving as a visual and symbolic marker rather than a physical barrier. Yet even this theory raises questions. If the purpose was merely to delineate space, why invest in a continuous stone structure of such length? Why not use more flexible or less labor-intensive markers? Adding another layer of intrigue is the broader archaeological landscape in which the Khatt Shebib is situated. The surrounding deserts of Jordan are home to numerous enigmatic features, including large-scale stone formations known as desert kites, believed to have been used for hunting, as well as geometric arrangements visible only from above. These structures suggest a long tradition of landscape-scale planning and environmental manipulation. It is possible that the Khatt Shebib was part of a larger system, an integrated network of movement control, resource management, and spatial organization. If so, its meaning may only be understood in relation to these other elements, if forming a kind of ancient infrastructure whose logic has yet to be fully reconstructed. And yet, despite all these theories, the central question remains unresolved, and it is here that the true mystery of the Khatt Shebib emerges most sharply. What was its actual purpose? This is not merely a question of classification, but of intent. The wall is too long to be incidental, too coordinated to be random, and too deliberately constructed to be dismissed as a minor or local feature. At the same time, it lacks the defining characteristics of known categories. It is not a fortress, not a road, not clearly a boundary, and not obviously ceremonial. It exists in a conceptual void, resisting the frameworks through which archaeologists typically interpret the past. This ambiguity is precisely what makes the Khatt Shebib so compelling, and in many archaeological contexts, mystery arises from missing pieces, fragments of a larger puzzle that can, in time, be reconstructed. But here, the puzzle itself is unclear. We do not know what picture we are trying to assemble. The wall challenges our assumptions about ancient engineering, about the relationship between scale and function, and about the ways in which past societies organized their landscapes. It suggests that there were forms of knowledge, systems of planning, and cultural priorities that do not map neatly onto our current understanding. Perhaps the Khatt Shebib was multifunctional, serving different roles at different times. Perhaps it began as a boundary and evolved into something else. Or perhaps its purpose was symbolic, embedded in social or cultural meanings that leave no material trace. And it is also possible that its significance was obvious to those who built it, so self-evident that it required no explanation, an idea that is both humbling and unsettling, as it reminds us of the limits of modern interpretation. In the end, the Khatt Shebib stands as a quiet but powerful reminder that not all ancient achievements are monumental in appearance, and not all mysteries are hidden beneath layers of complexity. Sometimes, the most profound enigmas lie in what seems simple, a line of stones stretching across a desert, asking a question that has yet to be answered. What do you think the true purpose of the Khatt Shebib was? A boundary, an ancient management system, or something entirely different? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the sun-scorched plains of southern Portugal, near the quiet town of Reguengos de Monsaraz, lies a prehistoric site that challenges nearly everything we assume about early human societies. Known as the Perdigões complex, this vast archaeological landscape dates back to the late Neolithic and Chalcolithic periods, roughly between the 4th and 3rd millennia BCE. At first glance, it appears deceptively simple, just a series of shallow ditches carved into the earth. But when viewed from above, a far more astonishing pattern emerges. Multiple concentric rings, expanding outward in carefully arranged circles, forming a geometric design so deliberate and so consistent that it defies any notion of randomness. This was not merely a settlement. It was a place of intention, of repetition, of meaning, encoded not in writing, but in shape. The discovery of Perdigões did not come all at once. Early surface observations hinted at something unusual, but it was only through modern aerial photography and geophysical surveys that the full complexity of the site became visible. Beneath the soil, hidden for thousands of years, lay an intricate system of ditches, some overlapping, some cutting through earlier ones, others forming nearly perfect circular enclosures. Over time, archaeologists began to realize that this was not a single-phase construction. Instead, Perdigões had evolved across generations, with each new community adding, modifying, or even deliberately erasing parts of what came before. The result is a palimpsest of human activity, a layered record of decisions made by people whose beliefs and motivations we can only begin to imagine. But what is perhaps most striking is the technical sophistication behind these constructions. The ditches were not randomly dug trenches. Their arcs maintained consistent curvature, suggesting careful planning and execution. Entrances are positioned with notable precision, and several align with astronomical events such as the sunrise and sunset during solstices. This implies not only observational knowledge of the sky, but also the ability to translate that knowledge into large-scale earthworks. Without written language, without metal tools in the early phases, these communities created a landscape that functioned almost like a calendar inscribed into the ground. It is a reminder that prehistoric people were not merely surviving, they were observing, calculating, and encoding meaning into the very terrain they inhabited. Yet for all its apparent order, Perdigões resists simple classification. Unlike fortified settlements, it lacks clear defensive features. There are no substantial walls, no towers, no signs of sustained conflict. Instead, the evidence points towards something far more symbolic and communal. Excavations have revealed deposits of animal bones, often intentionally placed and sometimes burned, alongside fragments of pottery that appear to have been deliberately broken as part of ritual practices. These are not the remains of everyday domestic life. They are traces of events, gatherings, ceremonies, perhaps even seasonal pilgrimages, where people came together to perform acts that held shared significance. Even more enigmatic are the human remains discovered at the site. Rather than orderly burials, the archaeologists have found fragmented bones, isolated skulls, and evidence of cremation. Some remains appear to have been moved after initial decomposition, suggesting complex funerary rites that involved multiple stages. These practices differ markedly from more conventional burials of the same period, raising questions about how the inhabitants of Perdigões understood death, identity, and the body itself. Were these acts expressions of reverence, transformation, or something more unsettling? The material evidence offers clues, but no definitive answers. Adding to the mystery is the presence of objects originating far beyond the immediate region. Exotic materials, such as ivory and distinctive ceramics, indicate that Perdigões was connected to broader networks of exchange. This was not an isolated community. It was a node within a wider cultural landscape, a place where ideas, goods, and people converged. Such connectivity suggests that whatever occurred here held importance not just locally, but across significant distances. And yet, despite all these layers of evidence, architectural, ritual, economic, one question continues to dominate scholarly debate. Why circles? Why does everything at Perdigões return, again and again, to the same fundamental shape? The circular form is not incidental. It is repeated obsessively, across different phases of construction, across different generations. Even when older ditches were filled in or abandoned, new ones were often created in similar configurations, reinforcing the same geometric logic. And this persistence suggests that the circle held profound meaning for the people who built and rebuilt this landscape. But what kind of meaning? One possibility is cosmological. The circle is the most immediate human abstraction of the sun and the moon, the celestial bodies that govern light, time, and seasonal cycles. The alignment of entrances with solstices strengthens this interpretation, implying that the entire site may have functioned as a ritual space connected to the passage of time. In this view, moving through the concentric rings could have symbolized movement through cycles of days, of seasons, perhaps even of life and death. Another interpretation focuses on social organization. A circular layout eliminates hierarchy in a spatial sense. There is no single dominant direction, no privileged axis. Everyone within the circle is equidistant from the center. Could Perdigões have embodied a worldview in which community, rather than authority, was central? The repeated construction of circles might then reflect not just cosmology, but a social philosophy encoded into space. There is also the possibility that the circles served as boundaries, not defensive, but symbolic. Crossing from one ring to another may have marked transitions between different states, from the ordinary to the sacred, from the living world to the realm of ancestors, from the individual to the collective. In such a framework, the site becomes less a place to live and more a place to experience transformation. And yet, none of these interpretations fully explains the intensity of the repetition. The effort required to dig and maintain these ditches was immense, especially given the tools available at the time. To repeat this labor across generations, always returning to the same shape, suggests a level of commitment that goes beyond practicality or even symbolism as we understand it. It hints at something deeper, an idea so central that it demanded to be inscribed into the earth itself, over and over again. Perhaps the most unsettling possibility is that the meaning of the circles is simply beyond our current frameworks of understanding. Without written records, without direct continuity of tradition, we are left interpreting a language of forms without a dictionary. The circles of Perdigões may represent concepts that do not map neatly onto modern categories of religion, society, or science. They may belong to a way of thinking that has no direct descendant. In this sense, Perdigões is not just an archaeological site. It is a message from a lost cognitive world, a world in which geometry, ritual, and landscape were inseparable. The circles are not merely shapes, they are statements. But statements about what? Time, community, the cosmos, or something else entirely? As archaeologists continue to excavate and analyze the site, new data will undoubtedly refine our understanding. But it is unlikely that the central mystery will ever be fully resolved. The circles will remain silent, precise, and endlessly repeating, inviting us to look, to measure, to theorize, and ultimately to confront the limits of what we can know about the people who came before us. In your opinion, what do the circles at Perdigões truly represent? Time, ritual, or a completely unfamiliar way of thinking? And share your thoughts in the comments below. Set within the rolling chalk landscape of Wiltshire, not far from the iconic silhouette of Stonehenge, the vast enclosure of Durrington Walls stands as one of the most intriguing and enigmatic constructions of the Neolithic world. At first glance, it appears as a massive earthwork, an immense circular bank and ditch enclosing what might seem like an empty field. But beneath the surface lies the ghost of a complex timber architecture that once rivaled the grandeur of Stonehenge itself. Known through archaeological reconstruction as a timber circle, sometimes associated with nearby Woodhenge, this vanished structure invites a deeper question. What role did it play in one of the most sophisticated ritual landscapes of prehistoric Europe? The geographical placement of Durrington Walls is far from accidental. Once situated close to the River Avon, it forms part of a carefully structured ceremonial landscape that appears to link water, wood, and stone into a coherent symbolic system. Archaeological evidence suggests that this site was not isolated but deeply integrated into a broader network of movement and ritual, possibly involving processional routes connecting Durrington Walls to Stonehenge. In this interpretation, the river itself may have acted as a liminal boundary, a transitional pathway between different realms of existence. While Stonehenge, with its enduring stone architecture, has often been associated with ancestors, death, and permanence, Durrington Walls, with its ephemeral timber constructions, may have represented life, vitality, and the transient nature of human existence. This duality, if intentional, reveals a level of conceptual thinking that challenges simplistic views of Neolithic societies. Excavations at Durrington Walls have uncovered compelling evidence that this was not merely a ceremonial site, but also a place of gathering on a massive scale. Remains of houses, hearths, and large quantities of animal bones, particularly pigs, suggest that people traveled from distant regions to participate in seasonal feasts and communal activities. These were not small gatherings, but events of remarkable scale, implying a high degree of social organization and coordination. The timber circle itself would have stood at the heart of these activities, its towering wooden posts forming a monumental focal point for rituals that likely combined feasting, performance, and cosmological observance. Yet despite these insights, the true function of the timber circle remains elusive, obscured by the disappearance of the very materials that once defined it. What elevates the mystery of the Durrington Walls timber circle beyond mere speculation is the extraordinary precision with which it appears to have been designed and aligned. Beneath the soil, archaeologists have identified patterns of post holes arranged in concentric rings and radial alignments, revealing a geometry that is anything but random. These arrangements suggest that the builders were not simply erecting a functional or decorative structure, but one governed by an underlying system of measurement and orientation. The spacing between posts, the symmetry of the layout, and the consistency of angles all point toward an intentional design that required planning, surveying, and a shared understanding of spatial relationships. In a world without written mathematics or metal tools, this level of precision is striking and raises fundamental questions about how such knowledge was developed and transmitted. Even more compelling is the evidence that these geometric arrangements were tied to astronomical phenomena. Certain alignments within the timber circle correspond closely with the positions of the sun during key moments of the year, particularly the solstices. For example, some axes appear to align with the direction of sunrise or sunset at midwinter or midsummer, echoing similar alignments found at Stonehenge. This is not a coincidence, but rather a deliberate integration of celestial cycles into the architecture of the site. The implication is profound. The builders of Durrington Walls were not only aware of the movements of the sun, but were capable of encoding this knowledge into large-scale constructions with remarkable accuracy. This raises one of the most fascinating and challenging questions in the study of prehistoric societies. How did Neolithic communities, lacking modern instruments, achieve such precise astronomical alignment? The answer likely lies in long-term observation and cumulative knowledge. By carefully tracking the position of the sun over many years, marking where it rose and set on the horizon during different seasons, these communities could establish reliable reference points. Over generations, this knowledge would have been refined and standardized, allowing builders to reproduce these alignments with increasing accuracy. The timber circle at Durrington Walls, therefore, may represent not just a physical structure, but the culmination of centuries of observational science encoded in wood and earth. The geometric precision of the site also suggests the use of measurement systems, even if informal or non-standardized by modern definitions. The consistent spacing of post holes implies that units of length were understood and applied systematically, while the circular layout indicates a grasp of radial symmetry and possibly even proportional relationships. Whether achieved through ropes, pacing, or other simple tools, the result is a design that exhibits a level of order and coherence that would not be out of place in much later architectural traditions. This challenges the notion that complex geometry and astronomy are the hallmarks of advanced civilizations, suggesting instead that such knowledge has much deeper roots in human history. At the same time, the use of timber rather than stone introduces an additional layer of symbolic meaning. Wood, unlike stone, is organic, perishable, and subject to decay. Its use in such a carefully planned and astronomically aligned structure may reflect a deliberate choice to emphasize the transient nature of life, even as the alignments themselves point to the eternal cycles of the cosmos. In this sense, the timber circle becomes a powerful metaphor, a human-made structure that decays and disappears, aligned with celestial patterns that endure unchanged across millennia. The contrast between material impermanence and cosmic permanence may have been central to the rituals performed at the site. The scale of the surrounding earthworks further underscores the significance of Durrington Walls. The massive ditch and bank enclosing the site would have required the coordinated labor of hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals. This level of effort implies not only technical capability, but also a social structure capable of organizing and sustaining large-scale projects. The construction of the timber circle within this enclosure suggests that it was a focal point of considerable importance, perhaps the setting for ceremonies that reinforced social bonds, transmitted knowledge, and connected the community to the cycles of the natural world. Despite decades of research, and many aspects of the Durrington Walls timber circle remain unresolved. The exact nature of the rituals performed there, the meanings attached to its alignments, and the full extent of its connections to other sites in the landscape continue to be debated. Yet what is clear is that this was not a primitive or accidental construction. It was the product of careful planning, precise execution, and a deep engagement with both the physical and celestial environment. In the end, the timber circle of Durrington Walls stands as a reminder that the people of the Neolithic were not merely surviving in their environment, but actively interpreting and shaping it in ways that reflect a sophisticated understanding of space, time, and meaning. The posts may have long since rotted away, but the patterns they formed, etched into the ground and aligned with the heavens, continue to speak of a world view in which geometry and astronomy were not abstract sciences, but integral parts of human experience. And perhaps the greatest mystery of all is not how they built it, but how much of their knowledge has been lost, leaving us to reconstruct their intentions from the faintest of traces beneath the soil. In your opinion, is the geometric precision and astronomical alignment at Durrington Walls the result of knowledge accumulated over generations, or could it reflect a system of understanding that we still have yet to uncover? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the vast landscape of ancient mysteries, where monumental structures and lost civilizations often dominate the narrative, there exist quieter enigmas, objects that do not overwhelm with scale, but instead unsettle with their ambiguity. The Broken Hill Stone is one such artifact. At first glance, it is simply a weathered rock, marked by lines that twist and turn across its surface. But the longer one observes it, the more it begins to feel like something else entirely. A deliberate creation, a structured design, perhaps even a message, one that has endured the erosion of time, yet remains undeciphered. Located in a region believed to have been inhabited by ancient indigenous cultures, the Broken Hill Stone does not sit within a grand architectural complex or a clearly defined ceremonial site. There are no towering walls, no accompanying relics, no inscriptions in known languages to guide interpretation. Instead, it exists in isolation, as if deliberately separated from context. This absence of surrounding evidence is not just an inconvenience for archaeologists, it is part of the mystery itself. Why would such a carefully crafted object exist alone? Was it once part of something larger that has since vanished? Or was its isolation always intentional? The discovery of the stone did not initially attract widespread attention. It was not unearthed in a dramatic excavation, nor associated with a famous civilization. Rather, it emerged quietly into the awareness of researchers, gradually gaining intrigue as its unusual carvings were studied more closely. These carvings are the defining feature of the Broken Hill Stone, a network of lines that resemble a labyrinth, spiraling inward with a level of coherence that strongly suggests intentional design. Unlike random scratches or natural weathering patterns, these grooves follow a path, one that appears to guide the eye, and perhaps once guided something more. What makes these patterns particularly compelling is their structure. The lines are not erratic. They maintain a sense of direction, of flow. In some interpretations, they seem to lead from an outer boundary toward a central point, echoing the form of labyrinths found in various ancient cultures. Yet, there are no exact matches. The design is similar enough to evoke comparison, but distinct enough to resist easy classification. This tension between familiarity and uniqueness is at the heart of the stone's enigma. Some researchers have proposed that the Broken Hill stone may have held spiritual or ritual significance. Labyrinthine patterns have long been associated with journeys, both physical and metaphysical. In certain traditions, they represent the path of life, a symbolic passage through challenges toward a central truth or enlightenment. If the carvings on the stone served such a purpose, then the act of tracing them, either physically or visually, could have been part of a meditative or ceremonial practice. But if this is the case, where are the accompanying signs of ritual activity? Why is there no clear cultural framework to support this interpretation? The question of age further complicates the mystery. Without organic materials nearby to date, and without clear stylistic parallels, determining when the stone was carved remains a challenge. It could belong to a relatively recent period in human history, or it could be far older than currently assumed. This uncertainty opens the door to a wide range of possibilities, each one altering the context in which the stone is understood. Equally intriguing is the level of craftsmanship involved. The grooves, though weathered, display a consistency that implies careful execution. Creating such patterns on stone, especially with primitive tools, would have required time, patience, and a clear plan. This was not a casual act. Whoever carved the Broken Hill stone had a purpose, and that purpose justified the effort. The precision of the lines suggests not only skill, but intention, and it raises the possibility that the design was mapped out mentally, or even physically, before being etched into the rock. And so, all of these observations ultimately lead to the deepest and most unresolved question: the core mystery that defines the Broken Hill stone. What is the message it carries? If the carvings are truly a form of communication, then we are facing a system we do not understand. It is not a known script, nor a direct depiction of recognizable objects or scenes. It does not tell a story in any conventional way. Instead, it presents a pattern that feels meaningful, yet whose meaning remains beyond our reach. This ambiguity invites interpretation, but resists any final conclusion. One possibility is that the stone represents a map, not of physical terrain, but of something more abstract. The pathways may symbolize routes, connections, or even cosmological concepts. In this perspective, the center of the labyrinth could represent a focal point of significance, a sacred place, a source of power, or a conceptual origin. Yet, without additional context, such interpretations remain purely hypothetical. Another theory suggests that the carvings function as a mnemonic device, a tool for preserving memory. In oral cultures, where knowledge is transmitted through storytelling rather than writing, visual patterns can serve as anchors for complex information. The lines on the Broken Hill stone may once have guided the retelling of stories, histories, or teachings, with each turn and intersection corresponding to a specific element. If so, the stone is not merely an object, but a fragment of a lost narrative tradition. It is also possible that the stone's message was never meant to be read in the traditional sense. Instead, it may be experiential rather than informational. The act of tracing the lines, of engaging with the pattern, may itself have been the message. In this interpretation, meaning does not reside within the stone, but emerges through interaction with it. The labyrinth becomes a process, not a product, a journey, rather than a destination. More provocatively, one might consider that the message of the Broken Hill Stone was never intended for us. It may have been created within a cultural and symbolic framework so specific that without that context, it becomes effectively invisible. What we perceive as a mystery may simply be the result of distance in time, culture, and thought. The message still exists, but we do not possess the key to unlock it. And this leads to one final, unsettling thought. What if the stone has already said everything it was meant to say? What if the silence we perceive is not the result of loss, but of completion? In this sense, the Broken Hill Stone becomes a mirror, reflecting not the intentions of its creator, but the limitations of our own understanding. In the end, the Broken Hill Stone stands as a testament to the enduring complexity of human expression. It reminds us that not all messages are meant to be easily decoded, and that some creations are defined not by the answers they provide, but by the questions they provoke. It is a relic of intention without explanation, of design without documentation, a silent artifact that continues to speak even as we struggle to understand its language. So the mystery remains, unchanged and perhaps unchangeable. What is the true message of the Broken Hill Stone? Is it a map, a ritual tool, a memory device, or something else entirely? Or is it a reminder that in the vast expanse of human history, there are voices we may never fully hear, only echoes we can continue to follow, deeper into the labyrinth? Do you think we are truly looking at an ancient message, or just something we are assigning meaning to ourselves? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden beneath the limestone hills not far from Tel Aviv, Qesem Cave does not immediately appear extraordinary. Its entrance is modest, its chambers unassuming, and yet beneath layers of sediment accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years lies one of the most profound turning points in human history. Discovered in 2000, the cave has since revealed evidence that challenges long-standing assumptions about when and how early humans mastered one of the most transformative forces ever encountered: fire. Dating back roughly between 380,000 and 200,000 years ago, Qesem Cave offers not just proof of fire use, but something far more complex and unsettling. It suggests that early humans were not merely opportunistic users of fire. They were its careful managers, its guardians, and perhaps even its keepers across generations. At the heart of the cave lies a feature that has drawn intense scientific attention: a central hearth. Unlike scattered burn marks or isolated ash deposits found in other prehistoric sites, the hearth at Qesem Cave appears to have been used repeatedly in the same location over an immense span of time. Layer upon layer of ash, burnt bone fragments, and heat-altered sediments indicate that this was not a temporary fire, nor a seasonal occurrence. This was a fixed point in space, a deliberate maintained fire zone. Around it, archaeologists uncovered flint tools, butchered animal remains, and spatial patterns suggesting organized activity areas. The cave's inhabitants were not simply surviving, they were structuring their environment around fire. The hearth was not just functional, it was central, almost symbolic, a focal point of life. The evidence of controlled cooking further deepens the significance of this discovery. Burnt bones found at Qesem Cave do not show the chaotic signatures of wildfires or accidental burning. Instead, microscopic analysis reveals exposure to moderate, consistent temperatures, precisely the kind required to cook meat without destroying its nutritional value. Some bones even show signs of being fractured after heating, suggesting marrow extraction following cooking. This indicates a level of planning and understanding that goes beyond instinct. These humans knew how to use fire not just to survive, but to enhance their diet, to extract more energy from food, and ultimately to fuel the biological changes that would shape human evolution itself. But it is here, at the intersection of evidence and absence, that the greatest mystery of Qesem Cave emerges, one that continues to puzzle archaeologists and anthropologists alike. If the hearth was used continuously over tens of thousands of years, then a critical question must be asked. How did these early humans maintain fire over such vast stretches of time? Fire, by its nature, is fragile. It dies without fuel, disappears without care, and requires either constant attention or the ability to recreate it. Yet at Qesem Cave, there is no clear evidence of fire-starting tools, no definitive traces of friction-based ignition devices, no unmistakable signs that these humans could reliably produce fire on demand. This leads to a deeply intriguing and unresolved possibility. And perhaps the inhabitants of Qesem Cave did not regularly create fire, but instead preserved it. Imagine a glowing ember, carefully protected, carried and nurtured day after day, generation after generation. In such a scenario, fire would not be something easily replaced. It would be precious, even sacred. Its survival would depend on social continuity, on knowledge passed down with precision, on rituals of maintenance that ensured it never went out. The hearth then becomes more than a physical feature. It becomes a symbol of continuity, a thread connecting individuals across time through a shared responsibility. Alternatively, it is possible that these early humans possessed fire-making techniques far earlier than previously believed, but left behind no recognizable tools. Methods such as striking flint against pyrite, or using perishable materials like wood for friction-based ignition, may not survive in the archaeological record. If this is the case, then Qesem Cave forces a re-evaluation of technological timelines. It suggests that cognitive and cultural advancements associated with later human species may have emerged much earlier, hidden in the gaps of preservation and evidence. The mystery deepens when considering the consistency of the hearth's location. For thousands of years, despite environmental changes, shifts in population, and the inevitable disruptions of time, the fire remained in the same place. This implies not only technical skill, but also tradition. Knowledge of where to maintain the fire, how to organize space around it, and how to use it effectively must have been transmitted across generations. And such continuity hints at something profoundly human. Memory, teaching, perhaps even the earliest forms of culture as we understand it today. Adding another layer of complexity is the identity of the people who inhabited Qesem Cave. Fossil evidence, particularly dental remains, does not fit neatly into known categories such as Homo erectus or Homo sapiens. Instead, they appear to represent a transitional population, one that existed during a critical phase of human evolution. If this group was indeed responsible for such advanced control of fire, it raises the possibility that key aspects of human behavior, organized living spaces, controlled cooking, long-term resource management, originated earlier and among different populations than previously assumed. The implications of sustained fire control are immense. Fire extends the day, yet allowing activity beyond sunset. It deters predators, creating safe zones in otherwise hostile environments. It transforms food, making it easier to digest and more energy efficient. Some theories even suggest that the consistent use of fire played a role in the development of language, as social groups gathered around a shared focal point, communicating, observing, and learning together. At Qesem Cave, these possibilities are not abstract. They are grounded in physical evidence. And yet, despite all that has been uncovered, the central question remains unanswered. Was the fire at Qesem Cave continuously maintained for tens of thousands of years, passed like a living inheritance from one generation to the next? Or did these early humans possess a lost knowledge, a method of creating fire that predates our current understanding of technological evolution? The silence of the archaeological record leaves room for both interpretations, and perhaps for others we have yet to imagine. Qesem Cave stands as a paradox. It offers some of the clearest evidence for controlled fire use in deep prehistory, while simultaneously concealing the very mechanism that made such control possible. It is a site where certainty and mystery coexist, where each discovery answers one question and raises another. In the flickering traces of ancient ash, we glimpse not just the origins of technology, but the beginnings of something more enduring: the human relationship with knowledge, continuity, and the unseen threads that bind generations together. And so the question lingers, as it has for hundreds of thousands of years: how do you keep a fire alive, not just for a night, but for an age? Rising quietly from the arid plains near Mundigak, not far from modern-day Kandahar, the Mundigak Palace platform stands as one of the most enigmatic architectural achievements of the Bronze Age. At first glance, it appears modest, weathered, eroded, and stripped of its former grandeur. But beneath its crumbling surface lies a story of engineering sophistication, social hierarchy, and technological understanding that challenges conventional assumptions about early civilizations. Built over 5,000 years ago, this elevated structure was not simply constructed to support buildings. It was designed to dominate space, redefine landscape, and perhaps even outlast time itself. The geographical setting of Mundigak played a crucial role in shaping its architecture. Located in a semi-arid region with extreme temperature fluctuations to limited rainfall and constant exposure to wind erosion, the environment would have posed significant challenges to long-term construction. Yet instead of relying on stone, often considered the more durable material, its builders chose mud brick, a material made from earth, water, and organic additives such as straw. On paper, this choice seems fragile, even impractical. Mud brick is vulnerable to moisture, easily eroded by wind, and prone to structural weakening over time. And yet, the palace platform still exists. This paradox forms the core of one of the greatest mysteries surrounding the site. How did a material so seemingly impermanent give rise to a structure that has endured for millennia? The answer may lie in a level of material science far more advanced than we typically attribute to Bronze Age societies. The mud bricks used at Mundigak were not randomly assembled lumps of clay. They were likely produced with careful attention to composition, mixing ratios, and drying processes. The inclusion of organic fibers would have acted as reinforcement, reducing cracking during drying and increasing tensile strength. The bricks may have been sun-dried under controlled conditions, ensuring uniformity and resistance to internal stress. Even more intriguingly, there is evidence to suggest that multiple layers of mud brick were compacted and arranged in a way that distributed weight efficiently across the platform. This was not simple stacking. It was engineered layering, a technique that allowed the structure to absorb pressure, resist shifting, and maintain stability over long periods. Equally significant is the architectural strategy behind the platform itself. Rather than building directly on ground level, the inhabitants of Mundigak elevated their most important structure on a massive artificial base. This decision transformed a vulnerable building into a commanding presence. Elevation provided protection against seasonal flooding, improved ventilation, and possibly reduced the impact of ground moisture, one of the primary enemies of mud brick construction. But beyond practical benefits, the raised platform also served a symbolic function. It separated the structure physically and visually from the surrounding settlement, reinforcing the idea of authority, hierarchy, and controlled access. In this sense, the engineering of the platform was not only about durability, it was about power. What makes the construction even more remarkable is its apparent adaptability to environmental conditions. Over centuries, mud brick structures typically erode unevenly, collapsing under their own weight or dissolving into the surrounding soil. Yet the palace platform retains a recognizable form. This suggests that its builders understood not only how to construct, but how to anticipate decay. The outer layers may have been designed to erode gradually while protecting the inner core, effectively sacrificing superficial material to preserve structural integrity. In modern terms, this resembles the concept of controlled weathering, an advanced idea rarely associated with ancient architecture. If this interpretation is correct, then the Mundigak builders were not merely constructing for the present, they were designing for the future, accounting for centuries of environmental stress. Archaeological excavations have revealed additional clues about the sophistication of this construction. The platform appears to have undergone multiple phases of rebuilding and reinforcement, indicating a long-term commitment to maintenance and adaptation. Rather than abandoning deteriorating structures, the inhabitants repaired, expanded, and modified them. This iterative approach reflects a deep understanding of structural behavior over time. It also suggests the presence of skilled labor, organized planning, and possibly even a governing system capable of coordinating large-scale construction efforts. In other words, the palace platform was not an isolated achievement. It was the product of a society with advanced technical knowledge and social organization. And despite these insights, the true nature of the structure remains uncertain. Was it a royal residence, housing an elite ruling class elevated above the rest of the population? Or was it a ceremonial center, a place where rituals and communal gatherings reinforced social cohesion? The scale and prominence of the platform suggest importance, but its exact function continues to elude definitive interpretation. This ambiguity only deepens the mystery. If it was a palace, why is there limited evidence of luxury or domestic life? If it was a temple, where are the clear signs of religious iconography? The structure seems to exist in a space between categories, resisting simple classification. The broader urban context of Mundigak adds another layer to this puzzle. The platform was not built in isolation, as it was part of a larger settlement with evidence of planned layout, specialized structures, and economic activity. This raises the possibility that Mundigak was connected to wider cultural and trade networks, potentially interacting with regions such as the Indus Valley Civilization or Mesopotamia. Similarities in pottery styles, architectural concepts, and settlement organization hint at shared knowledge or indirect contact. If so, the construction techniques seen in the palace platform may represent a localized adaptation of broader technological traditions, refined to suit the specific environmental conditions of southern Afghanistan. And yet, perhaps the most compelling mystery is not how the palace platform was built, but why it was ultimately abandoned. There is no clear evidence of sudden destruction, no widespread burning, no mass graves, no signs of catastrophic collapse. Instead, the site appears to have been gradually deserted, its structures left to the slow processes of erosion and decay. Climate change, resource depletion, shifting trade routes, or social transformation could all have played a role. But without definitive evidence, these remain hypotheses. What is certain is that the knowledge required to build such a structure did not vanish entirely, yet the specific methods and decisions that gave rise to the palace platform have not been fully reconstructed. Today, the ruins of Mundigak stand as a silent testament to a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity. The palace platform, with its enduring mud brick core, challenges modern perceptions of ancient technology. It suggests that even in a time often characterized as primitive, there existed a deep and nuanced understanding of materials, environment, and structural design. The builders of Mundigak did not simply create a place to live or govern. They engineered a structure that could withstand the relentless passage of time, using one of the most unlikely materials imaginable. So the question remains, was the resilience of the Mundigak Palace platform the result of accumulated practical knowledge, refined over generations? Or does it point to a level of technical sophistication that we have yet to fully recognize? And perhaps, more intriguingly, how many other ancient structures, now lost to history, once embodied similar knowledge, waiting, like Mundigak, to be rediscovered and understood? Do you think the mud brick construction techniques of Mundigak were the result of knowledge accumulated over generations, or evidence of an ancient technology we still don't fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Along the fertile banks of the Euphrates River, in what is now modern-day Syria, the ancient city of Mari once stood as a vibrant political and cultural center of Mesopotamia. At the heart of this city lay the vast Mari Royal Palace, a sprawling complex of over 200 rooms that functioned not only as a seat of power, but also as a carefully orchestrated stage for royal authority. Within its walls, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinarily rare: fragments of painted murals that have survived for more than 3,000 years, offering one of the only direct glimpses into the lost world of Mesopotamian wall painting. Unlike the enduring tomb paintings of Egypt or the vibrant frescoes of Minoan Crete, most Mesopotamian art has vanished, eroded by time, due to the fragile materials upon which it was created. Yet here, and against all odds, color still clings to ancient plaster, whispering stories from a civilization long gone. The discovery of these murals in the 20th century, led by archaeologist André Parot, revealed a dimension of Mesopotamian culture that had been almost entirely absent from the historical record. For decades, scholars had relied primarily on relief carvings, cylinder seals, and cuneiform tablets to reconstruct the visual language of this civilization. Painting, it seemed, had been lost. But the Mari murals challenged that assumption. They demonstrated that Mesopotamians not only painted, but did so with a level of sophistication, symbolism, and technical understanding that rivaled other great cultures of the ancient world. Now, among the most iconic of these works is the famous Investiture of Zimri Lim, depicting the king Zimri Lim receiving divine authority from the goddess Ishtar. The scene is both political and cosmic, merging earthly rule with divine sanction, and it is rendered not with crude simplicity, but with careful composition, color contrast, and symbolic precision. Yet beyond the imagery itself, Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of the Mari murals lies in their colors. Colors that have endured for over 3 millennia in an environment that should have erased them entirely. The pigments used in these paintings were derived from natural minerals and organic materials. Deep reds, likely from iron oxides, blacks from carbon-based compounds, whites from gypsum or lime, and blues and greens possibly from copper-based minerals. At first glance, and this might seem typical for ancient art, but the real mystery lies not in what the colors were made from, but in how they were applied and preserved. These pigments were not simply brushed onto walls. They were embedded into carefully prepared layers of plaster, suggesting a deliberate and methodical process. In some sections, researchers have identified multiple layers of paint, indicating that artists built up tones and details gradually rather than applying flat, single coats. This layering technique points to a nuanced understanding of both material behavior and visual effect, an understanding that feels unexpectedly advanced for its time. What makes this even more perplexing is the durability of these pigments. The climate of the region, characterized by intense heat, seasonal flooding, and long-term exposure to salts within the soil, should have degraded the murals rapidly, and yet traces of color remain vivid enough for modern scholars to reconstruct entire scenes. This raises a critical question. What binding agents were used to fix these pigments to the plaster so effectively? Unlike later fresco techniques seen in Roman or Renaissance art, where pigments are applied to wet plaster and chemically bond as it dries, the exact method used at Mari remains uncertain. Some researchers suggest a form of secco painting, where pigments are applied to dry plaster using organic binders such as plant gums, animal glue, or even milk-based compounds. But if this were the case, why have these organic materials not completely broken down over time? Others propose that the unique composition of the plaster itself, possibly mixed with fine clays or mineral additives, played a crucial role in preserving the pigments. Still, no single explanation fully accounts for the remarkable longevity observed. The mystery deepens when considering that many later civilizations, with access to more advanced tools and knowledge, struggled to achieve similar levels of pigment stability. In numerous ancient sites across the Near East, traces of paint have faded almost entirely, leaving only faint outlines where color once existed. Even in some better preserved contexts, pigments have flaked away or chemically altered beyond recognition. Yet at Mari, despite the passage of thousands of years and the violent destruction of the palace itself, color persists. And it is as if the artists of Mari possessed a formula or a technique that has since been lost to history. Whether this was the result of deliberate experimentation or a fortunate combination of local materials remains unknown, but the outcome is undeniable. These murals have outlived not only their creators, but also the very civilization that produced them. The placement of the murals within the palace further enhances their significance. They were not randomly distributed decorations, but integral components of the architectural and ceremonial experience. Positioned along corridors, reception halls, and ritual spaces, the paintings guided movement, framed encounters, and reinforced the ideological framework of kingship. As visitors moved through the palace, they would have been surrounded by imagery that constantly reminded them of the ruler's divine legitimacy and cosmic role. The murals functioned as a form of visual communication, perhaps one of the earliest examples of state-sponsored narrative art designed to influence perception and behavior. In this sense, the durability of their colors takes on an additional layer of meaning. These were not meant to be temporary displays. They were intended to endure, to continuously assert the same message across generations. Ironically, the very event that brought an end to Mari may have ensured the survival of its murals. Around the 18th century BCE, the city was destroyed, likely by the forces of Hammurabi. The palace was burned, its roofs collapsed, and its walls were buried beneath layers of debris and sediment. But while this destruction marked the end of Mari as a political power, it also sealed its artistic legacy in a protective tomb of earth. Shielded from sunlight, wind, and human interference, the murals were preserved in a suspended state of decay, damaged, fragmented, but not entirely lost. When archaeologists finally uncovered them thousands of years later, they revealed not just images, but a technological enigma. Today, the Mari Royal Palace murals stand as a paradox. They are both fragile and enduring, incomplete, yet profoundly informative. They challenge long-held assumptions about Mesopotamian art, suggesting that what we have uncovered may be only a fraction of a much larger, more complex tradition. Most importantly, they confront us with a question that remains unanswered. How did an ancient civilization, but working with seemingly simple materials, create colors that could survive for over 3,000 years when so many others have faded into oblivion? Until this question is fully resolved, the murals of Mari will continue to occupy a unique place in the study of ancient art, not merely as remnants of the past, but as enduring puzzles that refuse to be forgotten. If the color-making techniques of the Mari civilization were truly ahead of their time, why do you think this knowledge completely disappeared from history? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the arid expanse of the Rann of Kutch, within the ancient city of Dholavira, archaeologists uncovered one of the most perplexing artifacts ever associated with the Indus Valley civilization. A large, carefully constructed signboard bearing 10 massive symbols from a script that no one on Earth can read. At first glance, the structure seems deceptively simple. A row of bold, geometric signs once mounted above a gateway, likely visible to anyone approaching the city's fortified core. Yet beneath this apparent simplicity lies one of the deepest intellectual mysteries of the ancient world. The Dholavira signboard is not merely an inscription. It is a message deliberately designed to be seen, understood, and perhaps even revered. Yet today, it stands as a perfectly preserved enigma, and its meaning sealed behind a script that has resisted every attempt at decipherment for more than a century. The signboard itself is extraordinary in both scale and intent. Unlike the tiny seals and tablets typically associated with Indus writing, most no larger than a few centimeters, these symbols were monumental. Each character, reconstructed from fragments of white material such as gypsum or stone, measured roughly 30 to 40 centimeters in height. Mounted against a darker wooden backing, the contrast would have made them highly visible, even from a distance. This was not private writing. It was not meant for a single reader holding a seal in hand. Instead, it was public, architectural, and declarative. Perhaps one of the earliest known examples of large-scale visual communication in human history. Yet positioned at the Citadel Gate, the signboard occupied a place of authority and transition, marking the threshold between the outer city and its most controlled, possibly elite, inner zone. Whoever placed it there intended for it to be seen repeatedly by many and under conditions that emphasized its importance. Yet the deeper one looks, the more the focus shifts from the signboard's physical presence to the script itself. The Indus script, a system of symbols that remains one of the last undeciphered writing traditions of a major ancient civilization. This is where the mystery intensifies dramatically. For over 100 years, linguists, archaeologists, and cryptographers have attempted to unlock the meaning behind these signs. Thousands of inscriptions have been discovered across sites like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and Dholavira, yet none have yielded a definitive translation. The fundamental problem is not a lack of data, but a lack of context. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were eventually decoded thanks to the Rosetta Stone or Mesopotamian cuneiform, which could be compared across multiple languages, the Indus script exists in isolation. There is no bilingual inscription, no known descendant language, no explanatory text, only symbols, repeated across artifacts, silent and self-contained. This silence raises profound questions about the nature of the script itself. Is it a fully developed writing system representing a spoken language, complete with grammar and syntax, or is it something else entirely? A symbolic or administrative code, perhaps used for trade, identity, or ritual purposes? The brevity of most Indus inscriptions complicates the issue further. The majority consist of only a handful of signs, often fewer than 5, rarely exceeding 20. This is far shorter than typical written texts in other ancient civilizations, which frequently include long inscriptions, narratives, or legal codes. The Dholavira signboard, with its 10 large symbols, stands out precisely because it pushes against this norm. It is longer, more prominent, and more deliberate. It suggests that the Indus script was not confined to small-scale objects, but could also be deployed in monumental, public contexts. Yet even here, the message remains frustratingly concise. One of the most debated aspects of the Indus script is whether it encodes a language at all. And some researchers argue that the statistical patterns within the inscriptions, such as the frequency and ordering of signs, suggest linguistic structure, possibly representing a Dravidian language or another lost linguistic family. Others contend that the patterns are too limited and too repetitive, indicating a non-linguistic system, perhaps akin to heraldic symbols or religious icons. The Dholavira signboard sits at the center of this debate. Its placement and scale imply meaning and importance, yet its brevity leaves room for multiple interpretations. If it is linguistic, it could be a name, a city, a ruler, a deity. If it is symbolic, it could represent authority, protection, or identity in a way that transcends spoken language. Without a key to decode it, both possibilities remain open, equally plausible and equally unprovable. The implications of this undeciphered script extend far beyond a single artifact. The Indus Valley civilization was one of the largest and most sophisticated civilizations of the Bronze Age, spanning vast regions of South Asia with advanced urban planning, water management systems, and standardized architecture. Cities like Dholavira were meticulously designed, with reservoirs, drainage systems, and clearly defined zones for different social functions. Such complexity strongly suggests the presence of organized administration, record-keeping, and communication, functions typically associated with writing. And yet, if the Indus script does indeed represent a full writing system, it is one that has left no decipherable legacy. This creates a paradox, a highly advanced civilization that appears literate, yet whose voice has been completely lost to time. The Dholavira signboard intensifies this paradox by presenting what seems to be a public declaration in a language no longer accessible. It forces us to confront the possibility that entire systems of knowledge, languages, meanings, cultural contexts can vanish so completely that even when their physical traces survive, their significance does not. The 10 symbols on the signboard were once meaningful to those who saw them. They may have conveyed identity, authority, or sacred meaning with clarity and immediacy. Today, they are visually intact, but intellectually opaque. Their message reduced to pattern and form, without content. Comparisons with other ancient civilizations highlight just how unusual this situation is. In ancient Egypt, hieroglyphs adorned temples and tombs, their meanings now largely understood thanks to bilingual inscriptions and sustained scholarly effort. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform tablets preserve everything from epic literature to administrative records, offering a detailed view into daily life and governance. Even in cases where scripts were once lost, such as Linear B in the Aegean, eventual breakthroughs revealed the underlying language and transformed our understanding of those cultures. The Indus script, by contrast, remains stubbornly resistant. It is as if the civilization left behind a library with all the pages intact, but no way to read the text. Ultimately, the Dholavira signboard script stands as both an artifact and a challenge. It is a physical object that can be measured, analyzed, and reconstructed, and yet its most essential dimension, its meaning, remains inaccessible. It reminds us that archaeology is not only about uncovering objects, but also about recovering understanding, and that sometimes the two do not align. The signboard continues to provoke questions that cut to the core of human communication. What is writing if it cannot be read? What is a message if its audience no longer exists? And how many other voices from the ancient world have been preserved in form, but lost in meaning? If one day the Indus script is finally deciphered, the Dholavira signboard may transform from a silent monument into a speaking artifact, revealing its message after 4,000 years of silence. Until then, it remains one of the most haunting symbols of what we do not know, a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations can leave behind mysteries that endure far beyond their time. What do you think the 10 symbols on the Dholavira signboard actually represent? A city name, a ruling authority, or a forgotten sacred message? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The Tulia Jori Gate stands as one of the most enigmatic architectural discoveries near the heartland of the ancient Persian world, a structure that seems at once familiar and deeply out of place. Located not far from Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, the gate was only identified and excavated in recent decades, yet it immediately challenged long-standing assumptions about cultural boundaries, technological exchange, and artistic identity in the ancient Near East. At first glance, the ruins themselves may appear modest, low walls, scattered fragments of baked brick. But as archaeologists began to reconstruct its original form, a startling realization emerged. This was not simply another Persian structure. It was something far more complex, a hybrid monument whose visual language echoed the grandeur of Ishtar Gate, and one of the most iconic constructions of ancient Babylon. This resemblance is not superficial. It extends into the very materials, techniques, and symbolic systems embedded within the gate, suggesting that Tulia Jori may represent a deliberate and sophisticated act of cultural translation. Among all its mysteries, none is more striking or more revealing than the technology used in its construction, particularly the glazed brick technique that defines its surface. This is not ordinary masonry. Each brick was carefully molded, fired, and then coated with a mineral-based glaze capable of producing vivid, enduring colors, most notably the deep, luminous blues associated with Mesopotamian monumental art. Achieving such results required an extraordinary level of technical control. Most ancient craftsmen had to regulate kiln temperatures with precision, ensuring that the glaze fused properly without cracking or discoloring. They needed exact chemical compositions, balancing silica, alkaline fluxes, and metallic oxides to produce stable pigments that could survive not just years, but millennia. Even slight variations in temperature or mixture could ruin an entire batch. Yet the surviving fragments from Tulia Jori demonstrate remarkable consistency, indicating a mastery of materials that was anything but experimental or rudimentary. What makes this even more extraordinary is the context. In the early phases of the Achaemenid Empire, Persian architecture was not typically defined by such elaborate glazed surfaces. Instead, it emphasized carved stone reliefs, monumental columns, and then carefully proportioned spatial layouts. The presence of high-quality glazed brickwork at Tulia Jori therefore raises a fundamental question. Where did this knowledge come from? The most compelling answer points toward Babylon, a city renowned for its advanced ceramic technologies and its iconic use of glazed brick in monumental construction. When Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon in the 6th century BCE, he did not simply seize territory. He inherited a vast network of skilled artisans, engineers, and cultural traditions. It is entirely plausible that these craftsmen were relocated or that their techniques were transmitted across imperial boundaries. But Tulia Jori suggests something more deliberate than mere diffusion. The precision and scale of the work imply that this was not a tentative adoption of foreign methods, but a fully realized implementation of a mature technological system. The process itself would have been extraordinarily complex. First, the bricks had to be shaped with exact dimensions, as they would later form part of a larger compositional scheme. Reliefs of animals, mythological creatures, and geometric patterns that only became visible when multiple bricks were assembled like a puzzle. Each piece had to align perfectly with its neighbors, meaning that errors in size or curvature were unacceptable. After the initial firing, the glaze was applied, often in multiple layers, and the bricks were fired again at carefully controlled temperatures. The colors were not merely decorative, they were integral to the visual impact of the structure, creating a surface that shimmered in sunlight and projected an image of power, wealth, and divine association. Even today, fragments retain traces of their original brilliance, a testament to the durability of the technique. This level of sophistication forces us to reconsider the technological capabilities of the ancient world. It challenges the simplistic notion that innovation moves slowly or that cultures developed in isolation. Instead, Tulia Jori reveals a dynamic landscape of knowledge exchange, where ideas, skills, and materials could travel across vast distances and be reinterpreted in new contexts. Yet the question remains, why was this technology used here, in this specific location, and in this particular form? If the goal had simply been to adopt Babylonian methods, one might expect to see gradual integration into Persian architectural traditions. But Tulia Jori does not represent a gradual evolution. It appears as a fully formed statement, almost as if a piece of Babylon had been transplanted directly into Persian soil. This brings us to the broader interpretive mystery of the structure. The gate does not seem to function as a conventional defensive feature. It is not clearly connected to a larger fortification system, nor does it occupy a position that would make strategic sense in purely military terms. Instead, its design suggests a ceremonial or symbolic role. Perhaps it marked an important route, a processional path leading toward Persepolis or another significant site. Perhaps it served as a visual declaration of imperial identity, a way of demonstrating that the Achaemenid rulers not only controlled Babylon, but could replicate and appropriate its most iconic forms. In this sense, the glazed bricks were not just a technological achievement, they were a political message encoded in color and form. The imagery embedded within the bricks reinforces this interpretation. Motifs associated with Babylonian mythology, including composite creatures like the Mushushu dragon, appear in forms that closely resemble their Mesopotamian counterparts. These were not generic decorations. They carried specific symbolic meanings associated with divine authority and cosmic order. Their presence at Tulia Jori raises a provocative possibility that the structure was intended to communicate across cultural boundaries, to speak in a visual language that would be recognized by subjects and visitors from different parts of the empire. If so, then the gate becomes more than an architectural feature. It becomes a medium of imperial communication, a carefully constructed narrative about power, legitimacy, and continuity. Chronologically, the structure may also occupy a crucial position in the development of Achaemenid architecture. Some evidence suggests that it predates the most elaborate phases of Persepolis, hinting that it could represent an early experiment in integrating foreign techniques into a new imperial style. If this is true, then Tulia Jori is not an anomaly, but a prototype, a moment in which Persian builders explored the possibilities of combining their own traditions with those of conquered lands. The glazed brick technology, and in this context, becomes a key piece of evidence, proof that such integration was not only possible, but executed with remarkable skill. And yet, despite all these insights, the fundamental mystery remains unresolved. Tulia Jori does not fit neatly into any existing category. It is neither purely Persian, nor purely Babylonian, neither fully functional, nor entirely symbolic. It exists in a liminal space, a threshold, not just between architectural forms, but between cultural identities. The glazed bricks, with their enduring colors and intricate craftsmanship, are perhaps the clearest expression of this ambiguity. They embody both technological mastery and cultural dialogue, suggesting that the ancient world was far more interconnected and far more complex than we often imagine. In the end, the Tulia Jori gate structure invites us to rethink the nature of ancient innovation. It shows that technological breakthroughs were not always isolated achievements, but could emerge from moments of contact, conquest, and exchange. It reminds us that materials themselves can carry meaning, that a single brick, carefully crafted and placed, can tell a story that spans empires. And it leaves us with a question that continues to resonate. Was Tulia Jori a symbol of domination, a celebration of cultural synthesis, or something else entirely? A lost experiment in shaping a new kind of architectural language. Do you think the glazed brick technology at Tulia Jori Gate was the result of borrowed knowledge from Babylon, or evidence of an ancient civilization that understood materials far beyond what we imagine? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising quietly from the dry landscapes of western Zimbabwe, the terraced platforms of Khami ruins present one of the most striking yet underappreciated architectural achievements of pre-colonial Africa. Located not far from Bulawayo and emerging in the centuries following the decline of Great Zimbabwe, Khami represents both a continuation and a transformation of a powerful cultural tradition. At first glance, the site appears as a series of stone walls cascading down a hillside, forming layered terraces that seem almost sculpted into the terrain itself. But the deeper one looks, the more this landscape reveals itself not as a simple settlement, but as a deliberate and highly engineered system, one that merges social hierarchy, environmental adaptation, and architectural innovation into a single, coherent design. And unlike the more widely known stone enclosures of Great Zimbabwe, Khami's defining feature is its extensive use of terraced platforms built directly onto sloping ground. These platforms were not natural formations, but carefully constructed retaining systems, elevating specific areas above others and creating a vertical organization of space. This verticality was not incidental. It likely reflected a structured social order, where elevation corresponded to status, authority, and access. The highest terraces may have been reserved for elite residences or ceremonial functions, while lower levels accommodated supporting activities or broader segments of the population. In this way, the architecture itself encoded the social logic of the society that built it. Movement through Khami would not have been random. It would have been guided, controlled, and symbolically meaningful. Yet beyond its social implications, what truly defines Khami, and what continues to puzzle archaeologists and engineers alike, is the extraordinary construction technique used to build these terraces. The walls that support the platforms were constructed using a method known as dry stone masonry, a technique that involves stacking stones without the use of mortar or binding agents. While this method is not unique to Khami, the level of precision and durability achieved here is exceptional. Each stone was carefully selected, shaped, and positioned so that it interlocked with its neighbors, distributing weight evenly across the structure. The result is a system of walls that can rise several meters high, withstand centuries of environmental stress, and then maintain structural integrity without any chemical bonding. This is where the mystery deepens. The builders of Khami had no access to modern engineering tools, no written blueprints that have survived, and no visible evidence of advanced metal-cutting technology capable of producing uniform stone blocks. And yet the stones fit together with such precision that gaps are minimal and the surfaces appear almost seamless. In some sections, the walls are not only functional but decorative, incorporating geometric patterns such as chevrons and herringbone designs directly into the masonry. These patterns are not carved into the stone. They are created purely through the arrangement of differently shaped and sized stones. This suggests a level of planning and craftsmanship that goes far beyond basic construction. It implies an understanding of both structural mechanics and aesthetic design, integrated into a single process. The absence of mortar, which might initially seem like a limitation, may in fact have been a deliberate advantage. Dry stone construction allows for a degree of flexibility that rigid, mortar-bound structures do not possess. As the ground shifts slightly over time, due to temperature changes, erosion, or seismic activity, the stones can adjust minutely without causing cracks or collapses. This makes the walls remarkably resilient, especially in a landscape subject to seasonal rains and long-term environmental wear. In essence, the builders of Khami created a system that could adapt to its surroundings rather than resist them, a principle that aligns closely with modern sustainable engineering practices. Equally remarkable is how this construction technique interacts with the terrain itself. The terraces are not imposed on the landscape in a way that disrupts it. Instead, they follow the natural contours of the hillside, reinforcing and stabilizing it. Each retaining wall holds back soil and redistributes pressure, preventing erosion and landslides. At the same time, the stepped design helps manage water flow, slowing down runoff during rains and reducing the risk of damage. This suggests that the builders had a deep, practical understanding of local geology and hydrology, even if that knowledge was never formally recorded. They were not merely constructing buildings, they were reshaping an entire environment in a controlled and sustainable way. Another layer of intrigue lies in the apparent lack of construction debris or intermediate stages. Many ancient building sites reveal traces of experimentation, failed attempts, or gradual evolution in technique. At Khami, however, the masonry appears consistently refined, as if the builders had already mastered the method before applying it on such a large scale. This raises important questions. Where did this knowledge originate? Was it developed locally over generations, or was it transmitted from earlier centers like Great Zimbabwe? And if so, why does Khami exhibit such a distinct architectural identity rather than simply replicating its predecessor? Archaeological excavations at Khami have uncovered relatively few artifacts compared to the scale and sophistication of the structures. Pottery fragments, beads, and occasional tools provide glimpses into daily life, but they do not fully explain the purpose or organization of the site. This imbalance between architectural complexity and material remains adds to the mystery. It suggests that Khami may not have functioned as a densely populated urban center in the conventional sense, but perhaps as a controlled, possibly ceremonial or administrative space where architecture played a more symbolic role than a purely practical one. The transition from Great Zimbabwe to Khami also remains only partially understood. While both sites share the tradition of dry stone construction, their layouts differ significantly. Great Zimbabwe is characterized by massive, enclosed structures on relatively flat terrain, whereas Khami expands outward and upward through terraces. This shift could reflect changes in political structure, environmental conditions, or cultural priorities. It may indicate a move toward greater emphasis on visibility, hierarchy, and controlled access, qualities that are inherently expressed through elevation and layered space. Ultimately, the Khami terraced platforms stand as a testament to a form of knowledge that is both highly sophisticated and largely undocumented. Their builders achieved stability without mortar, precision without modern tools, and durability without apparent reinforcement. They created structures that are not only functional, but deeply integrated into their environment, responding to the challenges of terrain, climate, and social organization with elegant solutions. And yet, despite decades of research, many of the fundamental questions remain unanswered. How exactly were the stones shaped and transported? What systems of measurement guided their placement? And how was such a large-scale project organized and executed without written records? In the silence of these stone terraces, there is a kind of intelligence embedded in the very fabric of the walls, an intelligence that does not announce itself through inscriptions or texts, but through balance, proportion, and endurance. Khami does not simply represent a place in history. It represents a way of thinking about construction, one that values harmony with the environment, adaptability over rigidity, and precision achieved through skill rather than machinery, as it challenges modern assumptions about technological progress by demonstrating that complexity and sophistication can emerge in forms that leave little trace beyond the structures themselves. And perhaps that is the most enduring mystery of all. The Khami terrace platforms are not ruins in the conventional sense. They are incomplete messages from a past that understood how to build not just for the present, but for centuries beyond it. How do you think ancient builders were able to construct such precisely fitted stone walls without mortar or modern tools? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Across the vast, windswept landscapes of Siberia, where frozen plains stretch endlessly beneath a pale sky, fragments of an ancient visual language remain carved into stone, silent, enduring, and profoundly enigmatic. These markings belong to the Okunev culture, a Bronze Age society that flourished roughly between the 3rd and 2nd millennia BCE in the Minasinsk Basin. Unlike many other ancient civilizations that left behind decipherable scripts or structured writing systems, the Okunev people communicated something far more elusive, a symbolic system that exists at the intersection of art, ritual, cosmology, and perhaps an entirely different mode of thought. What survives today, stone stelae, burial markers, and petroglyphs, is not merely decoration, but a complex visual code whose meaning continues to resist complete interpretation. And at first glance, the Okunev symbol system appears almost otherworldly. Large anthropomorphic faces stare outward from stone slabs, their eyes exaggerated into circular voids, their mouths reduced to minimal lines, their expressions frozen in a state that feels neither human nor entirely abstract. Surrounding these faces are patterns, radiating lines, concentric circles, and geometric arrangements that seem to frame the figures as if placing them within a larger, invisible structure. These are not random embellishments. Instead, they suggest a carefully constructed visual grammar, one that likely conveyed layered meanings tied to identity, belief, and the unseen forces governing existence. The absence of a decipherable key has led scholars to consider that these symbols may not represent language in the conventional sense at all, but rather a symbolic system designed to be experienced, interpreted, and perhaps even felt rather than read. Among the most striking aspects of Okunev symbolism is the frequent depiction of hybrid beings, entities that merge human and animal characteristics into forms that challenge clear categorization. Figures with avian heads, horned silhouettes, or multiple appendages appear throughout the corpus, hinting at a worldview in which boundaries between species, realms, and states of being were fluid. This aligns closely with interpretations that link the Okunev people to early shamanic traditions, where transformation, spiritual travel, and communication with non-human entities were central practices. Within this context, the symbols may have functioned as visual records of altered states, ritual journeys, or cosmological narratives that unfolded beyond ordinary perception. Yet, beyond these expressive and symbolic elements lies a feature that is perhaps even more astonishing and far less discussed in popular interpretations: the peculiar and highly deliberate geometric precision embedded within many Okunev carvings. Despite being created over 4,000 years ago, often with tools presumed to be relatively simple, the compositions reveal a level of structural organization that suggests careful planning, measurement, and execution. Circles are not merely approximate. They are often strikingly uniform, maintaining consistent curvature across their entire form. Lines radiate outward with intentional spacing, creating symmetrical patterns that balance visually and mathematically. In some cases, those entire compositions appear to be governed by underlying grids or axes, as if the artisans were working within an invisible framework that dictated proportion and alignment. This geometric discipline raises a series of compelling questions. How did the Okunev craftsmen achieve such consistency without the advanced measuring instruments associated with later civilizations? Was this precision the result of accumulated practical knowledge, methods passed down through generations? Or does it point to a more formalized understanding of geometry that has not been fully recognized? The repetition of specific patterns across different sites suggests that these were not isolated instances of skilled craftsmanship, but rather part of a standardized visual system. This implies the existence of shared rules or conventions, possibly taught within the culture, that governed how symbols were constructed and reproduced. Even more intriguing is the possibility that this geometric precision was not purely aesthetic, but functional or symbolic in a deeper sense. Symmetry, repetition, and proportion are often associated with concepts of order, balance, and harmony, ideas that frequently appear in cosmological systems around the world. It is conceivable that the Okunev people embedded these principles directly into their visual language, using geometry as a means of expressing the structure of the universe itself. Concentric circles, for example, may represent layers of existence or cycles of time, while radial lines could symbolize the emanation of energy or the connection between a central force and the surrounding world. In this interpretation, the precision of the carvings becomes essential, as even slight deviations might disrupt the intended meaning or symbolic resonance. The placement of these geometric elements in relation to anthropomorphic figures further reinforces this idea. Faces are often positioned at the center of symmetrical arrangements, as if occupying a focal point within a structured cosmos. This central positioning may indicate importance, authority, or a role as an intermediary between different realms. The surrounding geometric patterns then act not only as decoration, but as a kind of framework that situates the figure within a larger system. In this way, each carved stone becomes more than an isolated image. It transforms into a microcosm, a contained representation of a broader metaphysical order. Archaeological excavations have revealed that many of these carvings were associated with burial contexts, adding yet another layer of meaning to their geometric precision. If these symbols were intended to guide, protect, or represent the deceased in the afterlife, then the accuracy of their construction may have held ritual significance. Precision could have been seen as a form of respect, a necessary condition for ensuring that the symbolic function of the carving remained intact. Alternatively, it may have been believed that only through exact replication of sacred forms could one access or influence the forces they represented. Comparisons with other ancient cultures only deepen the mystery. While geometric patterns are certainly not unique to the Okunev culture, the specific combination of abstract precision, hybrid imagery, and anthropomorphic central figures creates a visual system that is remarkably distinct. Unlike the structured hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt or the cuneiform scripts of Mesopotamian civilizations, the Okunev symbols resist linear interpretation. They do not appear to encode spoken language directly, nor do they follow a clear sequence that could be read from one element to another. Instead, they operate spatially, with meaning emerging from the relationships between shapes, positions, and proportions. This spatial mode of communication suggests that the Okunev symbol system may represent a fundamentally different approach to recording and transmitting knowledge. Rather than breaking ideas down into discrete units as writing systems do, it may have conveyed meaning through holistic compositions, images that needed to be perceived as a whole in order to be understood. In such a system, geometry would play a crucial role, providing the structure that holds the composition together and guides the viewer's interpretation. Ultimately, the Okunev culture symbol system stands as a reminder of how much remains unknown about the intellectual and spiritual lives of ancient peoples. Its strange faces, hybrid beings, and precisely constructed patterns challenge modern assumptions about what constitutes language, art, and knowledge. The geometric precision embedded within these carvings, in particular, hints at a level of intentionality and sophistication that is only beginning to be appreciated. Whether this precision reflects practical skill, symbolic necessity, or a deeper understanding of the world's underlying structure, it adds a compelling dimension to an already mysterious legacy. And perhaps the most intriguing question remains unresolved. Were these symbols meant to be understood by others, or were they created for a purpose beyond human interpretation altogether? If the geometry encodes a system of meaning that we have yet to recognize, then each carved stone may still be holding its message intact, waiting silently for a perspective capable of seeing it as the Okunev once did. In your opinion, is the geometric precision in the Okunev symbols simply the result of refined craftsmanship, or evidence of an ancient system of knowledge that has been lost to time? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the arid hills and rugged valleys of southeastern Spain, long before the rise of classical civilizations in the Mediterranean, a society emerged that would challenge everything we thought we knew about early Europe. Known today as El Argar, this culture flourished between roughly 2200 and 1550 BCE, leaving behind fortified hilltop settlements, carefully structured communities, and a material legacy that feels strikingly advanced for its time. At first glance, El Argar might appear to be just another Bronze Age society, but closer examination reveals something far more complex. A society that may have operated as one of the earliest centralized powers in Western Europe, built not only on social hierarchy and territorial control, but on a mastery of metal that still raises difficult questions today. Geographically, El Argar occupied a strategic region rich in mineral resources, particularly copper and silver. Its settlements were often constructed on elevated terrain, overlooking fertile plains and key routes, suggesting an awareness of both defense and economic control. These were not scattered villages, but organized centers where architecture followed recognizable patterns and space was carefully divided into domestic, productive, and possibly administrative areas. The positioning of these settlements alone hints at a society that understood the value of controlling both land and resources, an early indicator of complex governance. Archaeological excavations, beginning in the 19th century and continuing into modern times, have revealed a network of interconnected sites, each contributing to a broader picture of a culture that was anything but primitive. One of the most striking features of El Argar is its burial practice. The dead were often interred directly beneath the floors of homes, placed inside large ceramic vessels or stone-lined pits. This intimate connection between the living and the dead suggests a worldview in which ancestry, memory, and ownership were deeply intertwined. Some graves are modest, containing only simple goods, while others are extraordinarily rich, filled with weapons, ornaments, and finely crafted objects. This contrast reveals a rigid social hierarchy, one in which status was clearly defined and perhaps inherited. Even more intriguing is the presence of high-status female burials, some of which contain objects traditionally associated with power. These findings challenge long-standing assumptions about gender roles in ancient societies and open the possibility that authority in El Argar may have been more complex than a simple patriarchal structure. Yet, it is in the realm of metallurgy that El Argar truly distinguishes itself, and where its greatest mysteries lie. The people of this culture demonstrated an exceptional ability to extract, refine, and manipulate metal, particularly bronze, at a level of sophistication that seems unexpectedly advanced for its time. Archaeologists have uncovered a wide array of metal artifacts, including swords, daggers, axes, halberds, and ornaments, many of which display remarkable uniformity in design and quality. This consistency suggests not only technical skill, but also a degree of standardization that implies centralized production or strict control over manufacturing processes. The composition of these metal objects reveals a deep understanding of alloying techniques. By carefully combining copper with tin, Argar metallurgists were able to produce bronze that was harder, more durable, and more effective for both tools and weapons. This was not a simple or accidental process. It required precise control over temperature, material ratios, and cooling conditions. Evidence of furnaces, slag, and molds found at various sites indicates that metalworking was a specialized activity, likely carried out by skilled artisans whose knowledge was both valuable and possibly restricted. The existence of such specialization points toward a society in which labor was divided and expertise was recognized, a hallmark of advanced social organization. Even more compelling is the question of resource acquisition. Tin, a crucial component in bronze production, is not abundantly available in the immediate region of Argar settlements. This raises the possibility that the culture engaged in long-distance trade networks, acquiring materials from distant sources. If true, this would place Argar within a broader economic system that connected different parts of prehistoric Europe, suggesting a level of interaction and exchange that is often underestimated for this period. Alternatively, it raises the possibility that there were local sources of tin that have yet to be identified, or that the distribution of resources was managed in ways we do not fully understand. The control of metallurgy may also have been closely tied to power. Weapons found in elite burials are not only functional but symbolic, representing authority, status, and perhaps the ability to enforce control. The standardization of these weapons suggests that they were not individually crafted for personal use, but produced within a system that regulated access to them. This could imply the existence of a governing authority that controlled both the production and distribution of metal goods, reinforcing social hierarchies and maintaining order. In this sense, metallurgy was not just a technological achievement. It was a tool of governance, a means of structuring society and consolidating power. Comparisons with other contemporary cultures further highlight the uniqueness of Argar. While Bronze Age societies existed across Europe and the Mediterranean, few exhibit the same combination of social stratification, settlement planning, and metallurgical sophistication. Civilizations such as the Minoan civilization developed advanced art and architecture, but their social and political structures appear to differ significantly. Argar, by contrast, seems more rigid, more controlled, and perhaps more centralized. This raises an important question. Was Argar an isolated development or part of a wider pattern of emerging complexity during the Bronze Age? Despite its achievements, Argar did not endure. Around 1550 BCE, the culture appears to have declined rapidly, its settlements abandoned and its systems dismantled. The reasons for this collapse remain uncertain. Some researchers point to environmental factors, such as prolonged drought or soil depletion, which could have undermined agricultural productivity. Others suggest internal tensions, perhaps arising from the very social inequalities that defined the culture. There is also the possibility of external pressures, conflict, migration, or competition with neighboring groups. Yet none of these explanations fully accounts for the abruptness of the decline, leaving the end of Argar as enigmatic as its rise. What remains today is a fragmented but compelling record of a society that seemed to operate ahead of its time. Through its architecture, burial customs, and especially its metallurgical expertise, Argar challenges conventional narratives about the development of complexity in ancient Europe. It suggests that advanced organization, technological innovation, and social hierarchy were not exclusive to the great civilizations of the Near East or the Mediterranean, but could also emerge independently in other regions under the right conditions. And at the heart of this story lies metal, transformed from raw ore into objects of power, utility, and meaning. The furnaces of El Argar did more than produce tools and weapons. They forged a society, one whose structure, influence, and ultimate fate were intimately tied to its mastery of the material beneath its feet. Yet, despite decades of research, the full extent of this mastery and the system that sustained it remains only partially understood. Now, was El Argar a forgotten experiment in early statehood, driven by control over resources and technology? Or was it a fragile system, built on inequalities and dependencies that ultimately led to its downfall? The answers remain buried, quite literally beneath the floors of its ancient homes, waiting for the next discovery to bring them to light. In your opinion, what is the greatest mystery of El Argar? Its advanced metallurgical technology, or the way it controlled society through metal? Share your thoughts in the comments below.